UX researchers are moving faster and smarter with Alida. Reach real users at scale and capture insights fast enough to drive real decisions. We're talking 5 times faster recruitment and insights that actually influence action by blending qual and quant and embedding research at every step of innovation. Alida, where human-centered UX drives real business impact. Join us for Demo Day and see how Alida can elevate your research.
And you know who we have to thank for that? All of our wonderful sponsors. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. We are incredibly grateful for your support, and we're so happy you're here with us to learn and connect and grow today. For this particular program, I want to kick it off with a special thank you to our title sponsor for today, which is the one and only Rally. You can find their booth back there. Quick round of applause for Rally. And maybe I can get Oren, the CEO of Rally, to come up and say a few words with us. How does that sound?
All right, nice to see everyone. First of all, a big thank you to Alec and Maggie. Everyone please clap your hands for them. This is a monumental effort putting this on, and it's a one-of-a-kind research event that we all get to partake in, so big thank you to them. So if you have not heard of Rally before, we are the user research CRM. You can come check us out back there. We make it super easy for teams to connect with their own real customers. As you all know, in the world of research, it becomes more and more important to find the best quality participants. After all, the best quality research comes from the best quality participants. We make that fast and easy and safe. Today's an exciting day for our company. We just announced our Series A fundraise this morning. Thank you. And we're so grateful to be able to continue building and working alongside amazing research and research ops leaders like yourselves. So please come check us out. We're hosting a happy hour tonight as well, right around the corner somewhere, so it won't be too far, right there. And we're just so excited to be here. So thank you all, and have an amazing week.
Thank you so much, Oren. Cool. So I don't know if you've noticed, but we have for Research Week quite a few curators. This is the first time we've done anything like this. And it's been awesome because we've finally gotten to see so many different points of view of conversations and topics and things that are important to talk about that us and our little team couldn't do ourselves. And when we think about the kind of people that we want to curate and host one of these programs, we're looking for some special stuff. And I'm sure you guys have all been following all this stuff, talk about AI and all that good stuff. Of course, we have a program on AI. But I remember hearing something very interesting to me, which was a conversation with, I think, Tyler Cowen, who said, intelligence is important, but there's other things that matter too. And one thing that he said was courage, for example, matters too. And when I think about leaders in our community who have the courage to say things that are unpleasant, sometimes difficult, sometimes important, I think that's great because that's where we find our growth, you know, kind of in looking inwards and finding places where things are uncomfortable and difficult and using that as an important way to grow. And when I think about courage in our space, one of the people that always comes to mind is the one and only Judd Anton. And I am so excited that Judd is going to be leading us through some very important, thoughtful, difficult, and courageous conversations this morning with a group of wonderful human beings that he will be introducing momentarily. So with that, I want to just give a big round of applause to Judd. Judd, can you please come up stage and we'll take it away. Oh, did we lose something? Slight mishap. We're going to fix this right now. Did we lose the thing? All right, we're going to get this plugged in. Anyone know any good jokes while we connect his microphone? All right, let's see, take a look at this. Are we all good? We good? Beauty.
God, that was anticlimactic. It was so anticlimactic, thank you. See, I needed a professional to plug it in properly. Woo, okay, we're gonna pretend that didn't happen. Hey everybody, my name is Judd Anton. Thank you, hello, thank you for the introduction. Welcome to Up, Up, and Away. I'm so glad to see your faces, so many familiar faces and unfamiliar faces. And welcome to Research Week, right? Like, they know how to start it off with a bang. That's what I think. Thanks to learners, thanks to Alec and Maggie and the crew. Thanks to the incredible array of sponsors who are literally surrounding you, just so that you see what's happening. They are coming from every side. You're amazing sponsors. We wouldn't be here without you. Again, my name is Judd Anton. I'm your curator and your host for this morning's conference. I'm thrilled to have one of the easiest jobs probably for the entire week because we've got 4 amazing leaders to learn from today. We've got Anne Diaz, Kristen Swanson, Christina Janszer, and Pratiti Raychoudhury. We'll hear their stories, we'll hear their advice, and hopefully you'll just be energized and inspired by this whole thing. The premise of the conference is basically simple, right? Researchers make great fucking leaders. Okay? But not just in research, everywhere, right? But I would argue many researchers are stuck in their lanes and feel that becoming more senior or becoming a stronger leader or having a bigger scope means getting a bigger research job, and that's the only option. And to be clear, that's great. Please get bigger research jobs. But there is a big, wide world out there. What if we broke out of the silo that we create for ourselves, a thing that's already happening? Yes to research, but also powerful leadership in different disciplines. What could we do for products and for businesses? What could we do for users and for our colleagues and the discipline of research if we were leading more broadly? We can be, and we are, product leaders and business leaders. And we can be even more powerful, especially in the context of a really rapidly changing industry. So that's the premise. And I don't think it's an accident that Research Week is starting off with a session which is fundamentally about leadership. There's a lot of attention to AI right now. Alec already talked about it, right? We're going to talk about AI a lot this week. But leadership, the thing that we will learn and talk about today, is a thing the machine will never do. It is the special sauce which turns our research into action and business impact. And so I think that's a thing we all need to focus on to start. Whether you're just starting out or already running the show, there is a place to be a stronger leader, and embracing who we are as researchers can be a core part of that. So is anybody interested in that? Should we talk about that today? Okay, me too. Me too. So today we're going to learn. That was such tepid applause. Come on. That was my applause line. It's fine. I'm not mad. So today we have these 4 amazing researchers who have broken the walls of research from a start in research to the most senior roles that encompass data science, analytics, design, equity, inclusion, product, so much more. And I'm going to take this moment to say that's my story as well. I began as an IC researcher and eventually had a job as head of design studio at Airbnb. And I want to take this moment to tell you one quick story that I hope will set us off on the right foot. I got an undergraduate degree in cultural anthropology, and then I went to 1,000 years of graduate school. But the best leadership, I'm going to tell you the best leadership lesson I ever got. It was a sneaky lesson. This lesson was taught to me in a graduate course in ethnography at UC Berkeley, taught by the amazing Dr. Jean Lave. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but she is a brilliant anthropologist. And I took a course with her, 15, 20 people on ethnography, and we did something that's going to sound boring to you in that class. We read 4 book-length ethnographies, and then we read them again, twice. And Jean said, this is how you do it. This is what it looks like. She said, the first time you read, you have one job to do, and that is to deeply understand what the author is trying to do, right? Read this as though you had written it. See through their eyes. The second time you read, your job is critique, but critique means knowing what they're trying to do and figuring out how to help them do it better. It was only much later I realized that Dr. Lave had given me the cheat code to leadership, right? I think that's it, right? It's the thing that allowed me to expand my role, I would say, is using my brain, my research brain, to understand my colleagues, executives, my team, my peers, to put myself in their shoes and figure out what they're trying to do. and then to find ways to help them do it better and more for all of us, right? And I think it's simple to say but hard to do. I'll say that. But I hope you can take that perspective. That little nugget that came to me through the side door has been the basis of a lot of the leadership that I've been able to have in my career. So just a quick reminder of what we're going to do today. It's going to be super casual. We're going to be in this lovely living room together. We might put our feet up, I'm not sure. I'm going to be in conversation with Anne and then with Kristen, and then they'll both be back on stage to take questions from you. Then we'll have a break, and then we're going to do the same with Christina and Pratiti. So should we get it rolling? Let's get it rolling. Okay, let's do it. All right, so first, I am so pleased to introduce our first speaker. I'm delighted to introduce Anne Diaz. Anne began her career in the nonprofit sector and then transitioned to UX research, which brought her to Airbnb in 2015. And at Airbnb, she shifted into product management to work on product equity and inclusion. Her current role is head of product inclusion at Airbnb. Please help me welcome Anne Diaz. Thank you for being here. What's happening? Oh, it's not on my ear. It fell out my ear. Oh my God, so many technical difficulties. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Jed.
Thank you for being
here. Hi, everyone.
Anne Diaz, everybody. So you and I got to work together at Airbnb, which was great.
We did, yeah.
So I know a little bit of your story, but I'd love it, I just told the world's most sterile bio. I would love it if you could tell everybody the short version of your leadership journey and how you've gotten, especially to the part where you have this incredible role at Airbnb today.
Sure. So I was thinking about how to condense 20-something years of career that also really makes a lot more sense in the rear view than it did going through it. Honestly, I feel like that's not an uncommon thing where you're making these changes and making these transitions and you're sort of like, what am I doing? And then you look back and you're like, oh yeah, it's very clear path. But as you mentioned, I started in the nonprofit sector and then I went to these really small startups. And for me, my MO, I think, where I'm happiest working is when I don't have very many resources. I'm forced to be very scrappy, and I'm doing a whole lot of things that are not in my job description. That is just what I like. Mm-hmm. And I think that was partly because that was what I had to do in those early years of my career. And so when I came to Airbnb, I was hired as a researcher. And honestly, I made that choice to interview with Airbnb partly, I think I might have talked to you about this. I wanted to see if I really liked research. That was one of the reasons I wanted to try to get this job at this big company with this amazing team, because I thought, I kind of fell into this. Is this something I actually am good at? And do I actually like it? Or is it just the thing that these small startups kind of needed me to do? And so, when I started at Airbnb, I was working on research, but I very quickly started, I think, doing things that were not in my job description.
I remember that.
Yeah, this was in a lot of our one-on-ones, Jed would say, Anne, you really don't need to do these 10 other things.
But then you did them anyway.
But then I did them anyway, because I really liked it. And I ended up moving into sort of product inclusion, honestly, because I just had this feeling of this is something I really want to work on. I really want to change something about this company. I want to try to solve a problem that feels really important and really difficult. And there were a couple little steps along the way. So I just want to tell one short story.
How many?
So there was one summer where one of the researchers on our team, her father was in a wheelchair. Do you remember Hannah had that intern?
Yes, for sure.
And her intern started looking at, I think it was CS tickets of other people who had been in wheelchairs or who had had some kind of disability, who were really having a hard time trying to use Airbnb. And the intern finished her summer project, and it was sort of there is a problem. That was the end of the summer project. And we operated in kind of a siloed way back then. Different teams had a very specific thing that they worked on. And I remember thinking, well, we should do something about this. Maybe there's a little side project that we can do. And I had this idea that the side project we could do was figure out a better definition of wheelchair accessible. At the time, we had this little filter that just said wheelchair accessible, and I thought, I'm sure we can just define it. That's going to be the thing that solves this. And we started doing some research. There were a couple other folks on the research team. Yeah. And it became really clear really fast that there isn't one definition of wheelchair accessible. Again, like looking back on it, I think, wow, I was pretty naive. Yeah. And I had this very, very basic idea of how we were going to solve the problem. But the thing that happens so often in research is you start thinking you're going in one direction and you learn a lot, and you realize, oh my gosh, I've learned so many other more important things along the way. And so we decided, what would really solve this problem would be having a lot of different filters for different aspects of the home that people might need. And depending on people's abilities, depending on the type of trip they're going on, the people who are coming with them, they can kind of find the places that are going to fit for them. So very sort of customized. But there wasn't a team who was going to work on this. So we sort of coerced a designer to work on a design. I talked to a bunch of engineers and kind of sweet-talked them into, wouldn't it be cool if you just built this sort of on the side? It's going to be really easy. We already have the design. And then I went to a product director, and I said, we already have everything set. We've got the design, we have the engineers, we're ready to go. You're good with this, right? And she was kind of like, whoa, where is this coming from? But okay. And that was how we started doing in-home accessibility, was this little side project. I was still a researcher, I wasn't a product manager, but I was kind of operating in that mode. And I think that was one of the first things that kind of got me into the path that I'm in right now.
I feel like one of the powerful things about that story is that it's basically you saying well, there was a thing you were passionate about, and as a way of making it happen, you kind of made it happen. You got the first part done, and then how did it go from there? Because now you have a whole role around it, but it started with this nugget of a thing that you made happen with your leadership. What did that part of it look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think that again, things make so much more sense in the rear view than they do at the time. But I think that there were some folks in product who started to see this is pretty good work. You kind of know what you're doing. This is really interesting. This is really good. And I had helped to also start the anti-discrimination product team about a year before doing this in-home accessibility work. And I was a researcher and the first person on that team. And I ended up sort of moving up in research, and I went on maternity leave. This is the real answer. I went on maternity leave, and on maternity leave, I was like, I don't know that I want to come back and do research. We had this conversation. I'm sorry. I had a team I was managing, and I remember calling you, and I was like, I have this new little person. I feel like I'm a new little person, and I want to apply my skills in a different way, and I don't quite know what I want to do. And some of the folks who were on the anti-discrimination product team reached out sort of serendipitously and said, hey, we've been looking for a product manager, and we keep interviewing people and we don't like anyone. Are you interested in this role? And I thought, seems like a lot more work than being a researcher. But
product management.
Yeah, product management. But maybe, and for me too, I think as a researcher, the thing that I really enjoyed most was not doing the research. It was figuring out what you can do with it. That whoa, this insight is going to allow us to totally change something and make something better for people. And also, the other thing that I started feeling was I was kind of sick of trying to influence other people. I wanted to call the shots a little bit.
Just decide.
Yeah, I just wanted to be the decider. I was like, I have good ideas. Yeah, I want to be the one who says, this is the direction we're going in, taking all the inputs, but saying this is the direction we want to go in.
You're in that moment, like put yourself back in that moment where you're like, this new opportunity has presented itself. It's not research, it's research adjacent. Should I do it? And like, if anybody has that opportunity out in front of them, like, how do you, like, what did you learn about like how to figure that out? Like, how do I decide if this is the right thing for me, if like for my leadership, for my career?
Yeah.
How did you figure that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish I had a good strategic approach, but I had this feeling of like, I can always go back to research. Research is something I know, it's something I'm really comfortable with, I enjoy doing it. That skill set isn't gonna disappear if I take this other opportunity. It's always something I can go back to. But if I don't take this opportunity, I think I'm always gonna wonder, how would it have gone?
What would have happened?
What would have happened?
Yeah.
And that was why I went for it.
So tell me about skill sets, right? So you work in a product role in a space that's adjacent but different. Like, talk to us about like the skills that you use. Are any of them like? Do you still sort of use your researcher brain? Like, how do you apply it in a product role and in the inclusion role that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think. One of the biggest lessons, and I think greatest gifts that research gave me, was this ability to have a lot of humility when you start looking at a problem, where you just don't know, right, what the answer is going to be when you start on a research project. And again, I think that was one of my favorite things about doing research, was sometimes you're given this question, or you can see that the product team that you're working with has this need, and you're like, honestly, no clue. I don't know why people do this thing. I don't know why this thing happens over here. I don't know what people actually want. I know what I want, but who knows? And starting that journey of trying to figure out what are all the different needs and where are they coming from and what is the thing sort of underlying those needs too. A lot of that is my job today.
Yeah, still the job. So, okay, at the risk of throwing shade at all product managers, I feel like one of the, sorry if any of you, like, I feel like one of the things that happens in the product world is you kind of have this illusion of confidence, right? Like you just talked about the humble learner vibe, which I feel like is research bread and butter.
Yeah.
But in a product role, don't you just have to like know the answer and write the damn PRD or whatever? Like how do you, I'm being facetious, but like how do you translate from one to the other in the product role you're in, where you have to define the tactics and the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have really tried to rely on my team, but also the other product partner teams that I work with. So in my role today, it's evolved even more. And basically, I'm almost like a consultant, which is like a weird word to say internally to a company, but I work with all the different product leaders that we have across Airbnb on when they're scoping an idea. I'm in the room and trying to provide guidance, ideas, research that we have, both qualitative, quantitative, and also data that we have access to try to give people a steer on, hey, if we do X, I'm worried that we're going to be creating these unintended consequences downstream. Or if we do Y, we're kind of forgetting about this other opportunity that we have over here. And something that you said, Judd, about really trying to deeply understand the people that you're working with, I think that really comes in handy, because my role is I'm trying to influence what these different product leaders want to do and the directions they want to go in, and I understand that they want to launch these big new things and they want to be seen a certain way, but I also understand that most of them are just, this is going to sound very Pollyanna-ish, but I really do believe that most people want to do the right thing and are pretty good people. And if I can give them some insights that's going to help their product reach more people and help more travelers, more hosts actually have a great experience, they're going to be happy to have that information.
Yeah. Given that you are still continuing to succeed in this role, though, like something is working. So tell us the secret to influence. Give us all the secret to influence. So because it seems like the role you just described is one where you have sort of many partners, and like you said, it has to operate through influence to a degree, and it's clearly working. Yeah. But like if you had to give everybody a tip, just like as leaders in the room, like secrets to influence from Anne Diaz.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No pressure. Let's go.
God. I mean, I think that I am trying to constantly just remember that the people that I'm working with are just people.
Yeah. Who have no idea what they're doing.
Who have no idea what they're doing. Who have no idea what they're doing. And again, that I try to come at our conversations from the perspective of I'm assuming good intent from all of these people that I'm working with. I'm assuming that they want to build the best thing that they can. I'm assuming that they want to do the right thing, whatever that is. And so then when I hope that it comes across when I give them constructive feedback on things that they're doing, that they know that I'm coming at it not because I want to. It's not a gotcha. It's not a let me show you how much better of a product person we're partners in this together, and we both have the same goal. And let's do some brainstorming. I don't know the best way to build the product. I don't. But I have information that could be useful to you, and you've got information that probably with our powers combined, we can come up with something pretty cool. Yeah. And I think that trying to approach my relationships in that way of this is a real partnership. Yeah. You're a real person. Yeah. I think that has seemed to work.
Yeah, it's funny because I think you're like the subtext that I hear in my brain is kind of, I think very often researchers don't give other functions the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? It feels almost like we're white knighting out there, representing for users, which is important, right? But the reality is, hey, we have these partners and they're trying to do things too, and they probably have best intentions, and maybe if we all thought, if we gave them that a little more often, we could do more together.
Yeah. Yeah,
I can imagine working in the sort of inclusion domain and equity domain, there's some additional nuances to that.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the savior complex would be very easy to bring to some of these conversations. And so I try to keep a couple things in mind. First, again, I don't have all of the answers. I know a lot of the different problems that are out there. I know what our data is telling us, but that doesn't mean I know exactly what we need to do about it. And I think trying to bring that humility is generally very helpful. Second, I really do think about this concept of calling people in rather than calling people out. I think when you're talking about how do you make a product more inclusive, how do you make it work for more people, sometimes the feedback that you give can be interpreted as, oh my God, Anne's telling me all the ways I'm a terrible person and that I've really messed up and I don't think about other people and I'm all these bad things. And that is not a productive way to build product. That is not a good way to partner. Yeah. And that is not a good way for people to say, let's make sure Anne's at the table again. Yeah. Right? Because I have to be in the rooms in order to provide input that's going to make things, I think, more constructive and better for more people. So I really want to approach people with, again, assuming good intentions and trying to provide information that feels like, hey, you may not know about this, but here's something really wild that we've seen happening, or here's something that maybe we didn't expect. That's an unintended consequence that we really want to fix. Yeah. And that, again, that seems to be working.
I love it. Sort of brainworm of the day number one, call people in, don't call them out. I love that. And I feel like I love your point because I feel like you're also saying when you communicate with people, because research is only as good as the way we communicate it, but it's the same in the product domain, I guess. And it's how do we do this not just in a way that inspires change, but that keeps us focused on the things we're trying to do together, make the product better, make the business better, all those things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So how do you, I would love it if you could be really prescriptive and give some advice, right? Which everybody should know, though, of all the folks who will be on the panel today, like, I feel like everybody was like, you want me to give advice? I don't know these people. And I think we're researchers, right? It's hard to give blanket advice.
Yeah.
But like, I'm interested in your advice. Like, people who are out there who are researchers who want to make a similar shift. Either they want to move into a product role, or maybe they want to be champions for equity and inclusion in the way that you have been. Are there a couple nuggets that you would give to everybody about how to advance that journey in a similar direction to the way you did? Be really prescriptive about it.
Yeah, okay. Well, first, I think sometimes people reach out to me and they say, like, I really want to do product inclusion. How do I do it? And I say, okay, are you already working in product in some way? Oh, you are? Cool. Then you can do it. You can do it right now. Like, there's nothing holding you back. You don't have to have a special title to do this. And actually, I think all of our products would be better if every single one of us kind of picked up that mantle a little bit and said, okay, how am I, when I am bringing research to a product manager, or I'm working with a designer, who are the people that I might inadvertently be leaving out? And who seems to be most well represented by the research that I've done so far? And how do I sort of look around the corner and make sure that I'm not leaving out a whole group of people? I think sometimes in research and in design, we often think about like the golden path, or we're like, we got 80% of the feedback, so it's probably good enough. And there's so many great nuggets of information and huge unlocks that you get when you start to think about where is this product not working well enough for people, as opposed to how would this product work in the best possible way. And so I think to be really prescriptive, if you are interested in product inclusion, just challenge yourself to try to bring that lens already to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And it goes back to, I think, your first great point, which was like the way it sounds like, and I'm simplifying, that one of the big things that got you into the role, that allowed the transition from research into this role you're in now, was just doing the thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like how
just do it.
Just do the thing. Easier said than done.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But so like, how did you, I guess going back to that original question, like, we have a room full of people who want to be champions for inclusion, but also maybe want to transition into a product role or leadership in a product domain. Like, how do you use your existing set of research skills to do that?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, every single researcher already does this in some way, shape, or form, right? Like, research isn't just about the craft of doing research. It really is about, well, what do you do with what you learn? And actually, there was something, Jed, that this really stood out to me. That you told me, I think maybe in my first week or not first week. It's like my first research report that I did. Mm-hmm. I had put together this beautiful report because it was my first report at Airbnb, and I was really excited. And so I had all this exposition because I really wanted to show what a smart researcher I was, and all my methodologies and all the different how I did my sampling. And you were like, just scrap this. Just what's the so what?
Is that what I said?
Yes, I think you did.
I don't think anybody cares about this crap.
Yeah, exactly. I think that may have been the exact words.
Yeah, sorry.
And I remember thinking, oh shit, he's totally right. Nobody cares about this. I was so defensive of the craft and wanting to prove I was smart that I kind of like buried the lead.
Yeah.
The thing that was going to get people to care was, well, what's the so what of all of this? What's the so what? And I think that like if you can, as a researcher, just kind of keep the like, what's the so what in the back of your head at all times, and really push that forward. It's not so much. Sometimes people care about our methodologies, but honestly, most people do not. What they really care about is what is the thing that you're bringing to the table that I didn't know before, and what does that mean for me? And I think that really anchoring on like, well, what does this actually mean? That helped me get in that mindset of building a product.
Yeah.
And like, okay, well, now I know this. What do I want to do with it?
Yeah, we're product people, right?
Yeah.
I can imagine, especially because there's so much important maybe ideology, let's say, wrapped up in, and values wrapped up in inclusion and equity.
Yeah.
But also, I think we have to believe that inclusive products are just going to make more money.
Yeah.
And so, you end up I'm curious how you balance that, where you're arguing for the right thing to do and also the bottom line at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes the business case for inclusion can get a little bit it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
Loaded.
Because as soon as you start sort of tying ethics to money, you kind of
feel gross.
Yeah, you feel gross.
Yeah.
But I also think the reality is we have been able to, and we published a report on this last year. One of the big things that we started with was looking at our booking flow and trying to make more people be able to get accepted by hosts and make bookings successfully. Well, you could argue that's the core engine of Airbnb, right? If people aren't booking on Airbnb, we don't have a business. And we were able to look at places where there were disparities by race in how people were successfully going through that booking flow, and we fixed a lot of them. And that leads to a measurable dollar amount.
Yeah.
That's more bookings for the business. It's really hard to argue against that.
Yeah.
We were advocating for certain things to be included on the roadmap. I think sometimes people have this concept that if you make the product better for some people, you make it worse for others. No, that's not. I haven't found that to be the case. And I think if you came up with a solution that did that, that would not be a very good product solution.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. So again, asking you to be prescriptive, but also just to put another worm in everyone's head as we finish this conversation. If you could have one big takeaway for everybody from your experience as a leader who's made this amazing transition into a new space, what's the one thing you would want everyone to take away?
Just do it. Just do it. Again, if you've got a little something in your brain that you're thinking, oh, it'd be so cool if our product did this, or it'd be so interesting if we did that, or I can see this need and it seems like no one else can see it.
Just make it happen.
Just make it happen. Just make it happen. Find other people to be your allies, whether they're in leadership, whether they're your peers, whether they're in different functions. Just reach out. Don't be afraid to just go for it.
I love it. I remember that. I think that's such good advice. And remembering what you did is, many people as researchers don't have the, you have the domain you have. You have the people in your orbit that you have. But everybody has an orbit. You can take action. You can just do the thing, no matter where you're starting, because that's the ticket to the next thing. And I feel like you're a case of that. You're proof of how far you can go when you just do the thing.
Yeah.
So I, with all respect to Nike, I love that. I love that advice. Anne Diaz, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we'll welcome Anne back shortly to take questions. But first, I want to introduce you to our next amazing guest, Kristen Swanson. Quick bio for Kristen. After earning her doctorate in adult learning and organizational development, Kristen co-founded EdCamp and later moved to Slack, where her first role was focused on learning, but she ultimately became vice president of consumer insights. And then several years ago, she moved to Okta for a journey where she began as VP of research, but her current role is senior vice president of design and research and head of design at Okta. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So good to see you. Have a seat.
Hey, everyone.
Hi,
People
Kristen.
in the back are waving. I love that energy.
I know, I love it.
Good.
I will say that the sponsor table energy is strong. There's a lot of...
I'm feeling the vibes.
There's a lot of good vibes all around. I appreciate it. Cool. Cool. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. So you made your way from a doctorate, a little bit of L&D, to SVP and head of design at Okta. How the hell did you do that? 90 seconds, go.
Yeah.
No.
Similar to what Anne said, I was like, how do I even talk about this, especially in front of so many people? I see Matt and Christina back there that I so deeply respect and see as experts in this space. And I think the one thing I always focused on was just, I love to see people have an aha moment. And I just kept chasing that wherever I went. What is the role I can play to have more people get that aha moment that helps them do their job better. And I found that when I was at Slack, people started having those aha moments, and then they would give me more stuff to do. And the key was, when they would give me more stuff to do, I would be like, I'm not an expert in that. I didn't go to school for that. I'm not trained in that. But you just have to say yes. And so every time I would be like, wow, these people are having these aha moments, they'd be like, here's a new problem. And I would be like, okay, I don't know if I can do this. And I had this incredible boss, her name's Allie Rail, and she would be like, shut up, you can do it. And after that happened about 10 times, I was like, okay, I can do this. And many opportunities presented themselves along
I love
the
it.
way,
So just do the thing, say yes to it. But like, I'm curious, like how you approached it. So clearly that's worked out well for you. But like, okay, I know a lot of researchers have the opposite reaction where they're like, well, listen, I'm so busy already, or like you said, I don't know how to do that. So like, how do you recommend approaching that problem? Somebody's dumped a thing in your lap. It may or may not be, let's say, research related. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do it, but where do I start? You know?
I think this is a thing that I've struggled with, and it's actually where I've kind of had to like shed some of my inclinations and backgrounds as a researcher, because I'm a researcher. I like to be extremely thorough. I like to do everything well and perfectly. I don't know if anyone else is like that in the audience. And what I found was when these like big, giant, messy projects would land in my lap, I had to be like, what is the one thing I can do tomorrow to move this forward?
Yeah.
And it might not be the perfect plan, it might not be the whole solution, but if I just kept being like, okay, well, the one thing I can do is this, and then compound, when you look back in 2 months or 3 months, you actually got a lot done. And so for me, it's always about what is the one thing I can do tomorrow to make this a little bit closer to the reality I want. And I've tried really, really hard over the years to instill that in my teams as well.
Yeah. So how do you so I love that advice. And the follow-up for me is, how do you identify the one thing? What's the secret to figuring out where to start, if you will?
So when I started at Okta a couple years ago, there was a lot of conversation at the time around product discovery. We want to do more product discovery. We want more teams to engage in it. And there had been a number of efforts that had kind of started and stopped. And here comes this big, messy project. It's in my lap. Okay, how do we get the whole company to do more product discovery? And I was like, well, that's a really hard problem. What's the one thing I can do tomorrow? Okay, tomorrow, we're going to start a customer AMA program. It's 30 minutes every Thursday at 10 a.m. We get a customer in. We have a Q&A with them about a topic that everyone cares about. And then we have a guided conversation after that. And I was like, I can do that. That is very actionable, measurable. And then we had that for a couple weeks. And then somebody said, you know what else we could do? Oh, we could have an ease of use. Great, okay. You know what else we could do? And you start building on that momentum. And in 6 months, you've got a program.
Yeah,
so.
I love it. I'm going to feed you with a thing that you said when we talked earlier, which I think is related, which is I think you talked about the concern that researchers can often be very stuck on being correct.
Maybe that's just me, but yes.
I don't think it's just you. So in the context of taking on a new area or a new project and trying to find the big thing you can do, tell us about that concern that you have and how we might conquer it individually or as a discipline.
Yeah. So, gosh, when I was in school and they sort of train you to be a researcher, they're like, and then you do all this research and we bring you in to tell us the answer, and you're kind of trained like that, and you really have to unlearn that. And so I was very comfortable in research and doing different projects around learning and customer insights because I really, really knew the space really well, and I felt really confident when I would be working on something that I have a lot of expertise, I can do this. And then when I started going into these other areas, I was like, well, I don't know.
How could I possibly? I don't have full knowledge.
If I don't have that, how do I do it? And what really came to me that I came to understand was everyone wants to have a good day at work. And the one thing that I understood through years of adult learning and all of that stuff was just people want to show up at work and they want to do a good job. And if I could be a part of designing the system and designing the environment for, first of all, the people on my team to show up and have a pretty good day at work, Like, that was half the battle, because everybody on my team is way smarter than me, and they're going to come up with way better answers. So that was like part one. But then once I started to kind of like think about it as click two, I work in B2B SaaS, so that's our customers. Like, is the thing we're going to do going to help our customers have a better day at work? And if it's not, it's probably the wrong thing. And so every time I think about like, oh, well, I don't know, I'm not an expert in that, or I can't do that, I'm like, there's going to be these incredibly smart people on my team, and my job is make them have a really great day at work, give them exactly the clarity they need to solve the right problem to help all of our customers have a good day at work, and like the rest just kind of takes care of itself.
I love it. Is that so? I was going to ask you. I think you've been at Okta for like 2.5 years, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. What is time?
What is?
Yeah.
Well, except that you've been there 2.5 years, and it seems like been like promoted 19 times, gotten a bigger job 6 or 7 times. I don't know. So how do you explain to yourself in front of all of us? How?
This was not in the scripted question.
What? It's right here in my notes. So, but like, I mean. Can we say meteoric rise? I don't know.
No.
But whatever, let's not. But the point is, you're doing something right. Like, how do you explain having, like, what did you do that got you to this place where you're now head of design research at Okta, like, SVP a few years in, like that? Like, what did you do? What'd you do right? What'd you do wrong?
I did lots of things wrong, but I think the thing I did right was I really cared about the people. So I was very fortunate when I was hired at Okta. I was hired by a gentleman named Brian Hansen, who was employee 6 at Okta. He was part of the furniture, and he had been there forever. And when he hired me, he was like, I care about these people that are on this team. I think they're incredible people, and I want you to take care of them too. And that was something that I really took to heart. And he had been with the company for a very long time. And when he said, I'm ready to move on, he didn't say, I need you to know everything about, shading and colors of gray.
Yeah.
He said, I need you to know how to take care of these people, and I believe that you do. And so when we started from that point, it made it very easy for me to raise my hand and say, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's really, really important is trust your partners. So my CPO, Arnab Bose, is incredible, and he's done nothing but like help and support me along the way. So instead of him being someone who's like, well, maybe, he's always not only been at the table with me, but also been in my corner.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always think about is like, don't be in my table messing around with my stuff if you're not also in my corner, and he is always in my corner.
Love it.
And we've done some like incredible stuff together over the last 2 years, and it's been a huge part of why my job is fun.
So when I was at Airbnb and moving into design roles, I felt a huge amount of imposter syndrome.
Totally.
Like especially at Airbnb where visual design is really important. Like I'm not a visual designer. So I'm curious about your experience of moving into, like you were hinting at this a second ago, but like moving into a role that encompasses design, being the design leader at Okta. Like how has that transition been for you from more research things and insights things to also design, and like how have you made that translation?
Yeah, I mean, you are all already doing this, but it's like just be really, really expert on your customers and really understand what it is that they're trying to do, and trust your team. Your team is closest to the problem. They're going to have the best answers and results, and really trust them in the places where you might not be as strong, and own that. It's okay. I don't go in and say, I'm going to be the person that's going to know the best answer for X, Y, or Z, but I am the person that's going to go in and say, make your recommendation. How do I help you? How do I support you make this happen?
Yeah, I love that. I always like say, I don't know the answer, but I know how to find it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing you can get good at, is like helping people find answers. But so being like a little bit more tactical, let's say, for folks who are interested in expanding their leadership into a design realm, like what have you learned about what can be effective as you try to, crossing over is kind of the wrong way to think about it because we're all one team to begin with, but like incorporate design and be more of a design-focused leader wherever you are in your career, junior or senior. What would your advice be?
Yeah, I think really think about the user experience. Carve out time in your week every week to do support tickets, talk to customers that are not just in the research realm, talk to the customers who are having a bad day, understand sort of what Anne was saying, not just what's working well, but also where it's not working well, and really start to incorporate that. And then I would say, like, spend time with people in other roles on other teams. Really understand the challenges that they're up against, because often in research, we get a little bit of time to kind of take a step back from the flow and chaos that is product development process and really think. And sometimes those folks don't get that time. And so empathizing and understanding kind of what they're going through and how that might be and feel different sometimes from the cadences that we have as a researcher, and really lean into that, I think can help you build a lot of allies that then want to, you know, to Anne's point, like they want to invite you in. And if they want to invite you in, it becomes really obvious how you can sort of add value and keep growing from there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, so today in the room and on the live stream, we have just all sorts of folks at all stages of their careers. But to zero in for a minute on folks who are earlier in their careers, because I think a lot of, you know, a lot of folks have the orbit they have the job they have, and especially if you're early in your career, you might be like, well, Kristen, that sounds all good and well, but like, I have the job I have, and I have the colleagues I have. I'd like to believe you're never at a point in your career where you can't invest in broader leadership or do more or just say yes. But I'm curious, like, what your advice would be to those folks in particular, but to anybody, like skills to work on, to build, if you just want to be more of a leader, more influential, but especially if you're earlier in your career. How do you get started? What's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as with all questions for advice, it depends. But I would say
very researchy of you.
Yeah.
It depends.
I would say, you know, I think earlier in my career, I thought that my boss like knew everything, and if they weren't giving me an opportunity, it was because they like thought about it and they thought maybe I didn't fit the cut or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I actually have to tell my boss what I want. I have to tell my boss the kinds of things I'm interested in. And so this probably sounds really like obvious to many of you, but like for me, I had to make it a point to sit down with my boss and tell my boss what it was that I really wanted, and that wasn't necessarily a job. It was like, what I really want is I want to learn this, or you know, this person, I really respect them and I'd love to work with them more. And I remember I said that to Ali about someone at Slack. I said, oh, you know, I really respect this person. She's sitting in the audience. And she was like, oh, well, maybe you could like go shadow in her staff meeting because you could probably learn a lot from that. And like, it happened. Now, there's no way that my boss would have known that if I wouldn't have just said, like, I would like that. Yeah, so I think it sounds obvious, but tell your boss what you want.
I love that advice. You're reminding me of a backyard conversation I had with a neighbor who was going through a bad breakup. And she told me, she said that exact thing. She was like, I learned that I had to say what I wanted and needed from my relationship, and then they said it didn't work out, and then it didn't work out. And I thought to myself exactly what you said, like, oh my God, you have to say the thing. Like, you can't just expect people, in my relationship for sure, you know, but also in my work, exactly as you're saying. Like, I don't know anybody who can read minds, but like maybe they're out there. Mostly I think we need to say the thing.
And you know, if you're nervous to just say the thing, maybe one frame for the conversation I've used when I've been nervous is, what is one thing you think I'm really good at that you wish I did more of? And what is one place where you see me like poking my head around and you're thinking like, oh, that's an interesting choice. I'm really curious why you're doing that. And you'll get some really, really good answers. And I would say do it with your boss, but like if you are close enough with like any of your boss's peers, do it with them and you'll get a totally different answer and a totally different perspective. And usually it can kind of help you figure out what's clicking and what's not.
Yeah, I love that. So this is another one that's not on our script, but you just made me think of a question, which is like, comes down to like, how do you read your boss? So like in that conversation, where the question is, maybe the underlying thing is, I feel like really being effective is often having a really good radar for what's going on with your colleagues and your boss, asking them the right question in the right way. Like, and that's a very researchy skill.
Yes.
So like, I'm curious what you think about that, and feel free to disagree if you're like, yeah, that's not important.
So I feel like when I was at Slack, I could really, I had spent a long time there. I had worked with my boss for a really long time. We had tremendous respect for each other. I kind of always knew what she was going to say. Like, oh, if this happens, I think she's going to do that. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time I could get it right. And since moving to Okta, the GM of our department left a year ago, and since then I've been reporting directly to the CEO. I can only predict his behavior correctly like 12% of the time. Like weirdo, and so I think for me, what I've had to do is really think a lot about, one, this person is thinking about me way less than I am thinking about them, number one. And then with some of that pressure off, two, think about what is their day like? What are they actually going through and what do they care about? And so for me now, when I think about the CEO, I'm like, he's like, how do I make this business grow? How do I make this business grow? How do I make this business grow? And so one of the ways that I had to think about and sort of come to the table with him wasn't about this research project or this design project. He cared about the big customers that were in the pipeline. And so I had to find out who those customers were. Luckily, many of them were our research partners already, and come to him and be like, I know that you're meeting with so-and-so next week. We had 3 research sessions with them last year. Here's what they care about. These might be some areas that we want to invest in. And then he would be like, oh, those sound like design areas. I was like, yeah, they are, yeah. And so again, it's like really just trying to navigate and being okay with getting it wrong, especially if you've had, many of us have a lot of probably many of you have had like several bosses in the last couple years. And it takes a long time to learn your boss and be okay with getting it wrong.
Yeah, it's not necessarily personal. It can feel that way. But it sounds like you're talking about empathy, Kristen. Feeding you a line from our earlier conversation too, I feel like one of the things you were talking about was the importance of storytelling for not just researchers, but also in your role. So tell us about that. Like, tell us about that as a skill to build and how you use it in your role today as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, we're humans. We are wired to understand stories, and we're not necessarily wired to understand facts and figures. And I have the most brilliant CPO, and he is a million times smarter than me, and he knows every fact and every figure in the market size, and I'll be like, I have a story for how we're going to tell that. And it's almost like if you can put these two things together, we're practically unstoppable. And so for me, what I found is like finding the right match where this person has these incredible insights and these incredible ideas, and how can I put a story around it that everyone will understand? And so we were doing our planning last year, and there was all of this research and this market data about how, people want to buy these suites and they want a single vendor, and there's all these facts, and I was like, individually excellent, collectively spectacular. And he was like, yeah, okay, sure, we can put it in the paper. And I was like, no, like, that's the story. Yeah. Like, every piece has to be good, but together they have to be, like, super awesome. And he was like, oh, so, like, that's the whole thing in, like, a sentence. I was like, yeah, that's the whole thing. And then we just kept saying it, and we kept saying it, and we kept saying it. And the funniest part was we finally got to company kickoff, and it was, like, his big moment. He's on the stage, and he goes to say it, and he's like, individually spectacular, collectively. No, that's wrong. And he mixed it up. So we really laughed about that a lot. But then he nailed it, and it was
Then he nailed it.
It was like, and then everybody remembered it. So that was even better. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice. I remember being at Facebook, and we had a meeting with Mark Zuckerberg, and another researcher was there, and we had sort of given him something to the equivalent of that. And then there was the weekly Q&A where he repeated it, but he repeated it without credit, which people should get credit for their work. I believe that. However, afterwards, the researcher came to me and was so upset about it. They're like, oh, he didn't give me credit. And I was like, you got inside his head with your, like you incepted Mark Zuckerberg. Like, this is fantastic. So I don't know, like if you have advice for people about like how to figure that out, like how do you figure out how to like get right in there and get the narrative that really matters for people? Like, what do you focus on?
I think we are all very busy. We're working remotely. We're on like 8 million Zooms a day, and we're all tired. So like, what's the one thing that you can have people remember that's going to get them excited?
Yeah.
We just all need a little bit more excitement, a little bit more joy, and a little bit more clarity in our work. And so I really I think a lot about that, just because like I said, like nobody shows up at work wanting to do a bad job.
Yeah.
And so how do we just make it easier for people to do really, really good jobs, and then good things happen?
Yeah, I love the vibe of that too. It's such a good vibe. I feel like it also goes back to your earlier point about how researchers can really maybe get a little too concerned with correctness or completeness instead of just being like, what's the one thing that matters the most? And how do I focus on that? Like, how do you convey the one thing that matters the most and then make it stick? And like, that's really the narrative that really lands for people.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as a researcher, like when I've been thinking about research or putting together information, it's like I know the full answer. Like I can see it all, and maybe somebody only takes one part of it away, and then I would experience that as failure.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, like I told you the 10 things, and you only took the one thing. Like I'm focusing on those 9 things, and I've kind of had to flip my perspective and just be like, you got that one thing? Next time I'll get 2. Next time I'll get 3, and just kind of keep building from there. And there's nothing better than somebody will say like, oh, we did that research 2 years ago, but someone's finally doing it now. I'm like, good thing we were ready.
Yeah,
Look at
we
us
got
being
them
proactive, so.
Absolutely, we got them there.
Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer than you want.
And that one thing is a path to what they care about,
That's
right?
right.
It's like a map. It's a signal if you're listening.
That's right.
So people in the room who want to follow in your footsteps, who want to go on the journey you've been on, what's the remember one thing for them?
It's always about the people and how the people feel. So you might be the best researcher in the world. You might have the most correct, most impactful research results. But if the people around you aren't ready to jump on the boat with you and start paddling, it's really, really hard to gain their trust and move into different roles and to do different things. So people matter.
Remember, it's made of people. I love that advice.
All right.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, stay where you are.
Oh, stay.
And we're going to invite Anne back up. So Q&A portion of the conversation. So we're going to have a roving mic. And now's your opportunity to ask our amazing first panelists anything you'd like.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Liz. Hi, everyone. Sorry, are you okay? My question's a little bit wordy, so bear with me. This is for both of you, actually, Anne and Kristen. Anne, in a position lacking influence and authority, you essentially convinced stakeholders, designers, and engineering to basically work on a side project, essentially getting a new feature into the roadmap that maybe wasn't even there before. And you implied that you shared how doing that extra thing would align with Airbnb's kind of core engine and everything, and finding allies. And then Kristen, you said you spend each week reading support tickets and talking to customers, both of which are really awesome. I'm a rule follower, so the idea of working on something that I've not expressly gotten permission to work on or isn't in the roadmap, or talking to customers when I wasn't expressly given permission, feels like I'm working behind the backs of my team and my manager and stuff. Can you tell me more about navigating that kind of thing of just doing it, being okay, maybe being wrong doing it, and maybe sharing one other thing that you actually did or actually said or actually shared with those stakeholders to kind of gain their trust and convince them to work on this extra project? Does that make sense? I know that was a lot.
No, that was
Okay,
great.
great.
Very thorough. Yeah. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, I think that hearing you say you're a rule follower, I really empathize with that, because I would imagine many of us are hearing those chuckles. But I think that there isn't necessarily an express rule that says you can't do those things, right? So maybe someone hasn't told you to do them, but they also haven't said, well, you can absolutely not talk to any customers. You can absolutely not do any extra things on the side that might be good for our business. Like, no one has said that. And until the point when they do say that, I think you can make a rule for yourself of, when I see an opportunity that I think we need to work on, my rule is, as a researcher whose job it is to find low-hanging fruit and find opportunities, I have to act on it. And again, I think until someone tells you, like, no, not allowed, you're not breaking any rules. You're actually following them, I think, in the most clear sense, because you are taking the information that you have and identifying opportunities for the business. And again, I don't think that anyone can fault a researcher for doing that. Especially if it works out. Exactly. And even if it doesn't, because you're following those leads that you've identified through great work that you've done.
And one thing, I mean, everything plus one, that might be helpful to you as a tool is separating the task from the intent. So this is the task that I was assigned. This is the thing that I need to do. But the intent is really to help us make a decision about X, or to inform our approach for Y, which will often include lots of other things that may not be expressly prescribed by the task. So really, and that also can allow you to up-level your leadership. If someone says, go do a study on X, you can say, I think what you really want me to do is inform the decision on Y. I think it's this task, and like a little bit of pepper, a little bit of paprika, and a little bit of salt, and kind of get those other things in there too.
Yes to the project, no to the task, or yes to the task and more, because you understand the underlying project.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome, great question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This conversation has been just amazing. We've heard so much good advice on influence and just do it. And Judd, thank you for moderating it. And you made it feel like it is really a personal conversation. So I want to ask you more of an intimate question, so to say. As we're talking about different advice, and as you're saying you've done a lot of things right, some things wrong, can you give us a bad advice? What are some of the things that you've learned from your own mistakes that you think have worked, but you could also give it as an advice? Thank you.
I think one piece of bad advice that I would say, I have fallen into this before and it has been bad, is focusing more on the job than the work. So, I really want that job, or I really want to do that. And when I would get stuck in that kind of thinking, I would stop having fun. But when I was like, I'm working on this project with these people and this is rad, then things would go a lot better. And so I think earlier in my career, I was like very focused on like, maybe, I want to have this title or work at this kind of company. And frankly, like that always led me to unhappiness. And when I instead was like, I really like this thing that I'm doing and I really like the people that I'm doing it with, and the rest is just about saying yes to the right things, I've been a lot happier.
I really like that. I'm trying to think of something additional to say to that very good point. For me, I think that my sort of Achilles heel is that I want to get credit for a lot of things. Like, to your point, I would have been the person upset about Mark Zuckerberg not mentioning me by name, attributing a quote to me.
We might be in the wrong discipline.
I know. Just very honestly, sometimes I do. I'll say, God, I've been saying that for 2 years, and now this joker gets the credit. Yeah. But the reality is, when something that you have done finally breaks through, it is a win. And often I also remind myself there's that study that people need to hear something 7 times before they really get it.
At least.
Right? At least 7 times. And so I think, you know what? If they didn't hear it when I was saying it, that person just came in on time number 7, and I was, didn't happen to be in the room, but because I said that so many times, it finally stuck.
Do you know what one of the best things about having a research team in your orbit is, though? they always DM you and they're like, did you hear what so-and-so said? Remember when that was in your report? So like, they're like, I got you. Like, you didn't get your internet points. I'm gonna slide right in here and like, just let you know that I saw that. And it's like so delightful. Yes.
People paying attention.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, just to extend the question, like, do you feel like there was a wrong turn that you took in your career? And like, was there a mistake or maybe a bad advice that made you take that wrong turn? And now you're like, whoops, probably won't do that again.
So how many, like maybe 2 or 3 years into Slack, I was put in charge of incident response. Don't do that.
Bad idea.
I was on a pager 24 hours a day for like ever, and I broke. Like, you can break, and I broke, and it was bad. And luckily, there were many really supportive people around me who helped pick up the pieces. But yeah, sometimes just saying yes to solving any problem can get you into.
So don't get into incident response.
No incident response.
Okay. Yeah. And you had no wrong turns.
I've had no wrong turns. They've all just made so much sense. God, I mean, yeah, I feel like everything can make sense in retrospect, but like at the time, even honestly, like joining the anti-discrimination team as the product manager, there were so many times when I thought, oh, why did I do this? This is so much harder than the thing that I had been doing for 8 or 9 years that I totally knew how to do it, and I was good at it, and it was comfortable. Like, yeah, when you're in product and you're trying to influence not just stakeholders, but like your team, and you're sort of their manager, but you're not actually their manager, and so you have to get them to do things, but you don't really have any real say in what they actually do. You know, there's all of this kind of stuff, and I definitely thought, oh my God, why did I do this?
Turns out we can do hard things.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was the right thing. Like, sometimes being uncomfortable is the right thing.
Do hard things, be uncomfortable, go anyway.
Yeah.
Love it.
Hi, thank you again for your very candid input and advice. So I have a question about working in those different disciplines, so product and design, because those are very well-defined tracks at many larger hierarchical companies, right? This is a band 8, this is a band 9, this is what it looks like. Same thing with design. And so for you, as you moved into those spaces, what has it been like, particularly working with your peers, and how do you feel like you've skilled up or not? You know, like areas that you can lean more into or whatever, being in product and being in design. And I guess for me, I'm coming from a place where there's a bit of imposter syndrome when I'm working with like design, and I have been in a semi-manager role with working with design and like knowing how to speak their components and like this is what a component is and you know things like that. So yeah, any tips there and any like books that you like or resources that you would recommend?
Why don't you take this one?
It's a really good question. I do feel that same way sometimes. And I sort of felt like, oh no, you know, if I don't know exactly how all of this works, like for me, I'm not going to be as comfortable as I could be. And so when I first took on the design role, I was like, I think I just need to go build some stuff. And so I built a whole bunch of iOS apps. I have like an app that helps you make I mean, they don't do anything fun and fancy, but it was just like, I need to understand all the pieces that everyone's talking about, and the best way for me to understand it is to go do it. And so I made a gratitude journal and a reminder app and all these things, and all of a sudden, everything kind of clicked for me. And so I didn't have to play the game on the hardest mode to understand the problems they were facing, but I could play it sort of in my own way, on my own time, get those really important sort of foundational understandings, and then say like, oh, I understand now why they're really concerned if this component and this like language don't match up or whatever the problem might have been. And so I would say pick a point of entry that feels accessible to you and just like get your hands dirty and do some stuff and make some stuff and build some stuff. And then you can kind of demystify things that might be really scary just because you haven't done them yourself. And once you do them once, you're like, oh, they're talking about that? Like, okay, I can understand that. And so for me, the best way to like beat imposter syndrome was just to be like, I'm just gonna like try it out. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, at Airbnb, I think when I first started in the product role, I kept asking other product managers, like, where's the PRD template? Because I wanted to do everything in the right way. And there is none. We don't do that at Airbnb.
I heard there's no PMs at all at Airbnb anymore.
You know, that's a whole other conversation. A whole other conversation.
We're not going to go there.
And you know, product, I think, is one of these jobs where, Kristen, that point you made about like, think about the intent, not the work, is the whole job description. Like, there are 500 different ways to be a product manager and be successful, because the product manager role really is about leadership and driving people towards a particular outcome. The intent and the outcome is everything. How you get there is like all the sausage making behind the scenes that, like, quite frankly, I mean, different places are going to be different, but at Airbnb, nobody really cared what my PRDs looked like and my experiment plans and my tracking docs. Like, they didn't care. It was, did you do this thing that you said you were going to do, and what were the numbers?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. But I feel like the question is those documents and the way the bands are sometimes make you believe there's only one way to do this, and we've written it down.
Yeah.
But in reality, maybe not.
Yeah, yeah, and if you can, I had to remind myself, like, there isn't a blueprint for how I need to do this. And that means that nobody is following a path in product here. It's not just me who's feeling like, oh my God, how do I figure this out? Every single product manager is just doing the thing that feels most comfortable to them to get to the outcome that they're getting to. So I just have to remind myself, that's how I have to do this job too.
Love it. Great question.
Thank you very much. This is a great talk. And I'm wondering, can you talk about the emotional transition that you had from being a researcher where you did something that you loved, you wanted to be a leader, you wanted to make that kind of impact, but I'm assuming that you're no longer doing research. To me, I'm split. I do leadership, I do research. It's really hard to do both. And I actually feel a little bit of like proactive grief at the idea of giving up research. I'm kind of wondering what you think, or what that experience was like for you.
I am really bad at this. So I still sometimes get involved in certain research design or what the plan is. I have an amazing researcher. Her name is Crystal McCracken. She's one of our principal researchers, and she sits like right next to me. And so I'm just like, what are you doing? What's happening? And she's always very generous and always reads me into what she's doing because she knows how much I love it. But I would say for me, kind of moving in all of these different ways and moving into the role that I am now, it does feel really lonely. And it might be less about giving up the IC research than it is just about there are fewer people that may have the amount of information that you do or the visibility that you do. And so there's a lot more people considering or perhaps deciding if they like what you did. And there are a lot fewer people that maybe know all of the things behind the scenes that happened. And so I think for me, it's just been a matter of making sure that I have a really good network around me and really good family around me and really good friends around me to ensure that I have that in place, because it can be a little bit lonely sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. I didn't feel any grief not doing research anymore. That's the honest answer. Well, because for me, I liked what we could do. I loved the, ooh, look at all this cool stuff we learned. What does it mean? What should we try? What can we do? So much more so than the craft of it. And I think for me, then moving away from research, I worked with some amazing researchers. I still work with amazing researchers and data scientists. And the most fun part of my job, I think, is getting to see all of the insights and then start to think, oh, what does this mean? What does this mean? What do we get to do? And so I don't feel like I miss that part of research, which was the thing I loved the most. The almost like it used to feel to me like those magic eye posters. Where you like look at something and then the picture pops up. Maybe this is, I don't know.
I could never see those.
Yeah, well.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
But Anne, we would never be old enough to like have been around.
Totally. Yeah, I've read about these. I've seen them on a TikTok.
Yes.
When they
were on the
balls.
TikToks.
And so I feel like sometimes you have all those Post-its, or even you have a deck with all the insights, and you're like, what does it mean? And then it comes out.
Yeah.
That's the best. That's the best part of research.
Absolutely.
For me.
Love it.
Hey, I'm gonna be that guy, and I'm gonna say the word AI to you. So it seems like, at least in our organization, there's kind of a couple modes of thought. Like one is, hey, this is another tool. No one freak out, we're just learning how to use the tool. And hey, this is a fundamental shift to how we work. So wondering from each of you as leaders, do you subscribe to either of those, something else? And also, how are you helping your teams navigate through the change?
We live in an era where every session is an AI session. I love it.
I think I have a little bit of maybe a head start just because I think about adult learning and learning organizations and how to build cultures of learning. And so for me, it's like, this is a thing that is going to change how we learn, and we should think about it just the way we think about any other way that we're going to change how we learn in an organization. And I think that it's going to require a lot of iterative cycles. I think we're going to have to try a lot of different things, but I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing is as we start to experiment, the lines between roles that were already blurry are becoming a little bit blurrier. And so for me, when I think about my researchers, my designers, what I really want to provide for them is like, how do you take the skills you have and how do you navigate that line that was kind of already a little blurry? And if it gets blurrier, like how do we continue to navigate there? And so we've been talking a lot about the trust bank. And when we use AI within our engineering, product, and design teams, are we using it in a way that builds trust across the groups of people and everyone feels like they are, participating? Or does it take trust away? And so that's one thing we've been using. But then we've also been saying, does using AI in this way, whether it's in our product or together in our teams, does it build trust with our customers or does it take trust away? And so when you start to put that lens over it, it helps you see the human side that is interfacing with all of the different tools and ways that it can impact the organization.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still trying to figure it out, as I would assume all of us are. I mean, one thing that has been really interesting for me on my team is that there are a number of people with different learning differences who have found AI incredibly beneficial to how they're doing their work. Everything from summarizing or rewriting and editing their documents. And that has actually been really eye-opening for me because I feel like a little bit of a personal Luddite around this. Like I don't like it and I don't understand it.
Just want to sit in front of the magic eye poster.
Yeah, exactly. I'm much more comfortable with that kind of technology than this thing that's talking to me. But it has been, again, really eye-opening, and I think I'm working on being more and more open as I see the opportunities that it can provide to people. And again, recognizing everyone approaches their work in different ways, and we can use these tools in ways that can be really dangerous and can be really scary, but also can actually be this huge sort of leg up and give people opportunities that they didn't have before.
Love it.
Yeah.
We got time for one more question, then we'll go to break.
Yeah. Hi, thank you all very much for sharing. I'm Renee. Question for you. You talked a lot about how you are looking in the rear view, but how are you currently growing in the present, whether from feedback that's explicit, implicit, or self-reflection? What do you do to keep going forward in the present and looking at your careers going further down the line?
Ooh, that's such a good question.
Good question.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I really love the concept of the personal board of directors. This is not a new concept, but I think, Kristen, you described some really good questions to ask of your boss and your boss's boss, and I have started to do that with folks who I've been really fortunate to work with along my career. And I'm trying also to make sure to not, sometimes I think when you are putting together a group of people who have really amazing skills and are really senior to you as part of your board of directors, you can, for me, I sometimes feel a little bit guilty asking for their time to like, please indulge me in telling me about myself. Sort of how it feels sometimes, but I have also started to remind myself more and more just how rewarding mentorship feels, because I know being on the other side of it. And so I'm trying to actually, in terms of thinking about what's next, be really intentional about the range of senior leaders that I'm reaching out to get input. Because I'm always thinking about how is, whatever this role that I'm in right now, how am I growing, how am I learning, and what is this chapter, what do I want this chapter to say in the novel of my career? And as soon as it starts to feel a little bit like, I don't know that I like the direction this is going, that's a time to reflect and get some input.
I think she gave a great answer. I think the only thing I would add to that is, I think earlier in my career, I always focused on like, what is the thing that you're good at? What can you do that you will be, that you are the best at? And now I've started to say like, no, that's important, but like, what's also the thing that brings me joy? Because I feel like I've just been trying to do what I might be good at for so long that I've lost sight of what I love and what I enjoy. And so my sort of like next chapter, I hope, kind of brings those things more into alignment.
I love it.
That's right.
Joy is important. Please help me thank Anne and Kristen so much. And what's that? Oh, thanks. And so we're going to go on a break, 15 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll be back for the second half of our program with Christina and Pratiti. So don't miss it. We'll see you then.
Introducing Listen, the first AI customer researcher. Listen speaks to thousands of people per week and tells you exactly what they want and why. Here's how it works. I want to find out what marketers think about our website. With this prompt, Listen creates a discussion guide. Listen then taps into our network of millions of users to find the perfect people to interview. Within seconds, Listen starts hundreds of conversations in parallel.
What do you think about this site?
Looks cool.
What's cool about it?
I mean, having an AI that can help you go through that.
In 1 hour, Listen has done thousands of interviews and turns them into an executive summary, common themes, standout quotes, video highlight reels, and even slides. Iconic brands like Microsoft, Canva, and Chubbies already use Listen to make their most important decisions faster. We've raised $27 million from Sequoia to make every company customer obsessed. Comment Listen and we'll give you access and $1,000 worth of Listen credits.
One thing I noticed is that there were, two things I noticed in the first half is there was a lot of people hovering back there at various times. I'm like, come on, sit with us in our living room. The other thing I noticed is the open door to the bathroom yields the constantly flushing toilet. And I just kept having to remind myself it's not a commentary on the content. So what did you think about Anne and Kristen? Great? Yeah. I thought so too, and remembering that our goal today is inspiration for leaders, right? Like hearing stories, like sometimes there's details, sometimes it's advice, twists and turns, but really I hope, and I think we all hope, that everybody will kind of leave this room this morning feeling a little more confident and a little more inspired to go take everything that's made you amazing as a researcher or as a research leader and sort of experience it more broadly. So we're gonna keep that going. And we're going to keep it going. I'm so excited for you to hear from Christina Janszer, who's up next. Christina joined Facebook in 2005 when it was just a baby. And after helping to grow the customer support team, she founded the UXR practice at Facebook and helped lead it until 2016. And from there, she spent more than 9 years at Slack, where she began as director of research and ended as senior vice president of research and analytics, responsible for UXR, product analytics, and also the head of Slack's workforce lab. Are you catching a theme around here? Please help me welcome Christina Janszer.
Bringing my water.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I see that you brought your big dumb cup.
Just in case I get thirsty.
That's good.
Or
it's all
parched.
right. So first of all, I should say, so many of you know this already, but Christina was the first person to hire me in a UXR job. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
It's turned out.
Best decision I ever made.
It's been good. Thank you for that. I told a very condensed version of your story, but I feel like you in particular have had, you've experienced so many stages and so many roles in these stages of some of the biggest companies in our lives. I'm curious to hear your narrative of how, certainly joining Facebook and founding the practice, but also you kind of did it again at Slack, where you started in this research role and then expanded your leadership over time. Tell us a little bit of the key moments of that story for you and how it looked from inside your brain.
Yeah, so I think similar to Kay Swan and Anne, some of it was intentional, but a lot of it was sort of by accident, right? And I think even though a lot of it was by accident, I think I did a good job of making the most of each situation or each opportunity that presented itself. So the accident part was just joining Facebook to begin with.
In 2005, it was what the hell is this thing? Yeah.
It was a thing that I used a lot in college. It was a fun tool and a fun thing to play with. But I was sort of at a point when I graduated from college where I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was really stressed out about what I should be doing. I did product design at Stanford, and so I had been introduced to product design and user research, but not in the way that it is today, right? There wasn't really this idea of user research the same way that there is today. And so I joined in a customer service role. thinking that I'd be there for a few months while I figured out what I really wanted to do.
Right.
And I ended up staying there 11 years because it was just such a fun place to be. But I think the theme, if I sort of zoom out and think about sort of the theme throughout my career, I've always been really excited about understanding people. And that's both like, users, but also internal people. Like, I just get really fascinated by better understanding, the people who we're trying to serve, the people I'm trying to work with. And also, I'm really inspired by just impact. Like, I like to have impact. That's really important to me. I like to solve the most important problems. Sometimes those problems are, very obviously in my lane. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
But to me, like, the most important thing is just figuring out what are the most important problems to solve and then figuring out how to solve them.
Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you to role play the conversation, but like imagining those moments where like, they're like, hey, we're at Facebook. We really need a UXR practice, or we really need somebody to like join research and analytics or work on workforce stuff at Slack. Like, why'd they pick you? What did you do?
I know, such a bad choice.
Wait, that sounded really wrong. Like, they picked you? Not at all what I meant. I mean, like, yeah, and I realize it requires a level of self-reflection you might not be comfortable with, but it's like, what do you think it was that, like, because obviously they confidently picked you because you're an incredible leader, but what happened in that conversation or leading up to it that meant you're the right person for that job?
I think there's a combination of things. I think that, again, like, I really like solving problems, and I think I established myself as a trusted person, right? I was a person who got things done, right? And I was a doer, right? I didn't just spot problems, but I spotted them and then I fixed them, right? And I think the conversation back at Facebook, I spent a bunch of time doing customer service, so I was responsible for answering questions and answering all of the inquiries from our users. And I thought that was really interesting to hear what were people's questions, what were people's feedback, what were they confused about? Like, Facebook could be confusing for some people. And rather than just sort of answer those questions and move on, I was like, no, this is like free research, right? Like, I should be taking this, I should be sending it to the product team and making sure that they're acting on this. And so some of that just started happening naturally because I was so interested in what people were saying and realizing that, no, we can solve these problems. We're just gonna, I'm gonna build a relationship with the product people and really sort of make that happen. But my reflection was, this is all happening way too late, right? We're launching features.
Then everybody has
People are
problems.
freaking out about these features, and then they're sending thousands and thousands of emails. And as the person who is responsible for answering those emails, I was like, there's got to be a better way.
You need to stop the flow. Yeah.
got to stop the flow. And so some of this was like, hey guys, let's figure out how we can actually talk to people before we launch products. Let's start to anticipate what their challenges are going to be or what their feedback is going to be so that we can sort of build that into the process. And so some of that just sort of started happening naturally. And then again, I think I had established myself as a trusted person who got things done, who worked really hard. And I had a conversation with my boss at the time. We were talking about career stuff. What did I want to do? And that's sort of when the decision was made that I was going to start the user research.
Was it your idea? Do you remember?
That's a great question. I think it was yeah, I do think it was my idea.
Here we are. So I feel like this is a consistent theme for you, and I love it as a message for everybody, which is like, solve problems.
Yes.
Say more about that. Like, how do we, what's your advice? Like, solve problems. Why is that important, and how do we do it?
So I think the reason that I hesitated when you asked if it was my idea is it was my idea to do that type of work.
Right.
But, I didn't know exactly what it was called or what that should look like or what building a user practice really was. I just knew that there was a hole, there was a problem that I could fill. And that's just really inspiring to me, right? Which is, and I think about this a lot with the people that I like to work with. The people that I like to work with are the people who come to me and they say, hey, I see this problem or I see this opportunity. And then they say, and I'm going to solve it for you.
And here's what I think we should do.
Yes, there's nothing worse than somebody coming to you and say, here are all the problems that exist.
Yeah.
Can you
Your thing
fix
sucks
it?
and I don't have a better idea.
Exactly. And I think I think part of that is just like naturally who I am, but also like a lot of self-reflection of like, who do I like to work with? I like to work with people who get shit done, and people who are doers, and people who are positive and optimistic and, you know, can just figure it out. And so, yeah, so that was sort of how the sort of user research practice started. And, you know, we talked about imposter syndrome before. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I'll say that very confidently. I really did not know what I was doing. I knew that there was an opportunity in front of me. I thought that I was a person that could figure it out, but I had to sort of understand what was the opportunity, what was the like piece of that pie that I was personally going to be good about, you know, filling, and then how was I going to either work with other people or hire people, right, like you, who were much better than me at many other things, who could sort of fill in the other pieces of the pie.
Yeah. So how do you, like, if you're thinking, and I'm going to put thoughts into many heads that may not exist, but, you know, like, well, listen, Christina, that's all good and well, but I don't necessarily get to just, like, solve problems and have people listen to me. Like, I don't either know what the problems are, or I don't know how to do it in a way it seems presumptuous. I've got a day job, my dance card's pretty full already. So if there's a person who's like, listen, like, you're telling me to solve problems, but I don't know which ones to solve or how to make it appealing to people who would allow me to, like, sort of expand into that domain. Like, how would you address somebody who feels a little bit limited by that or skeptical of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the first step is like, how can you really understand what are like the biggest challenges that exist? And maybe you're able to identify those yourself just by understanding the business, understanding teams, understanding what's happening in the company. But then, you know, put on your researcher hat. Like, I think being a researcher is a superpower, right? No matter what your job is. Do internal research, right? Talk to people, talk to your peers, talk to your colleagues, help, you know, ask them what are the biggest challenges that they're experiencing, what's getting in their way of doing their job. Like, you will start to pick up on what these big problems are, and like, don't force yourself to solve a problem that you're not passionate about, but you'll find something that you're like, oh my gosh, like, that is a big opportunity.
That is an opportunity.
And I'm going to like figure out the steps that I'm going to take to do it, right? And yes, you have a day job, and sometimes if it's like something that you care enough about, you might just find a couple more hours, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes you have to do that.
Takes. Yeah, and I feel like a thing we talked about this morning is some researchers feeling a little stuck in their lane. They're like, well, I do see this problem, but it's not a research project. Should I even work on it? Heck yes.
Yeah,
right?
heck yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's like the common narrative in my career, right? And I think that also is sort of how the transition to data science happened, right? Which was, I'm not a data scientist, right? That's definitely not my strength or my skill set, but I identified an opportunity that was happening where I felt like our stakeholders did not have all of the data that they needed to make great decisions, right? Yep. And like, the piece of the pie that I could control was like the research piece of the pie, right? But I knew that that was only telling part of the story, right? And that's not, you know, that's not research's fault, right? Like, we tell parts of the story. We have different, you know, we have certain data that we look at, certain methods that we do, all that stuff. So I'm not saying that as a way to like, as a dig to research, but it's an opportunity for anyone to solve, which is like, hey, how do we sort of tell that whole story? How do we bring all of the pieces of the pie together to be more comprehensive? And, you know, part of that is working really closely with data science and figuring out how are we sort of working more together than before.
So what was that like for you when you sort of began to be a leader across data science? Like, were there unexpected aspects of it, or like, did it seem like a natural marriage?
It was really, really hard.
Say more about that.
It was really, really hard. I felt very passionately about it. So again, like, this was a problem that I felt really, you know, I just had a lot of energy around it. So so if we were to rewind to when I first started at Slack, I was responsible for user research, and then that sort of expanded to, like, you know, market research and survey science, and we kind of expanded the skills within sort of research, right? But reflecting on some of my time, you know, at Facebook, and again, this was so long ago, so I'm not here to talk about what Facebook is like today, but it always felt like research and data science when I was there were just very disconnected, right? And, you would do a research study, and then there would be all these follow-up questions, and you'd be like, oh, maybe I'll go talk to data science, or vice versa. But it all just happens so slowly, right?
Yeah.
And when I went to Slack, that was one of the things that I was excited to like have a second chance at, right? Which is like, what would it look like to bring those groups, not from an org structure standpoint, but just how could we better work together? How could we feel more joint ownership in answering company questions and figuring out like what is the best way to answer that question between all of these amazing skill sets that we have on both teams. And so it was more about like, how do we sort of solve this problem that it feels like the company has experienced, which is like disconnected data sources and disconnected teams. And so my approach was not asking for a reorg. My approach was just like, let's figure out how to work really well together. Let's figure out how to roadmap together. Let's figure out how to like approach sort of the problems together, which is like, what are the most important problems or questions that the company has? And then let's figure out how to divvy it up amongst the teams and work together, right?
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like the approach, and then we did end up doing a reorg because it just made sense.
Yeah.
And again, I had like a boss at the time that was like, yeah, you should just do this.
So tell us the story, like, and I realize no two situations are the same, but like, what was that conversation like? Like, how did it come to pass that happened? Did you have to convince somebody? Did you have obstinate data science leaders who were like, heck no? Like, what was that like?
No, I mean, that one was, I think, again, like I had already sort of proven myself by being the person who was like doing all this extra work to bring the teams together.
Yeah.
And I was the one who like put all the energy behind like, let's figure out how to joint roadmap together. Let's just do this, right? We're not, again, it wasn't about an org change. It was just like, this is the right way to solve the problem in front of us. And then through conversations with my boss, there were other org things happening that really are not relevant, but like she was like, we're having an org change anyways, let's just have everything going for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, no, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, you go.
Well, what I was gonna go back to the points about like, why was it so hard?
Carry on.
So you think, okay, so org structure, the teams are together, great. Now everyone can just like work magically together. The part that I think the reason that it was successful, I think, but it wasn't a success overnight. We really had to like retrain everyone on the team to think much broader than their own discipline, right? So my goal was that if a product person came to anyone on the research and data science team, whether they're a researcher, whether they're a data scientist, a service, whatever their role is that they could ask them, they could say like, hey, here's the big challenge that I'm experiencing. Here are the big product questions that I have. And that, let's just call it a researcher, would be able to say, okay, the best way to solve this is actually not for me to do user research. Like actually, like qualitative research is not the right way to solve this. It's actually going to be, some sort of data science method. I'm not the right person to do that, but I'm well enough aware of that method that I'm going to advise you to do that, and then I'm going to advise you to do this.
Yep.
And like they might not actually be the person who does the actual work, but they were well-versed enough to be able to sort of guide that conversation.
Absolutely.
And so you had to think, we had to help people sort of think more broadly. We also had to help people sort of have more, we had to help people like not look down on other disciplines too, right? Because there were some data scientists who were kind of poo-poo on qual, and we had to sort of help them see the light.
Maybe vice versa. I'm not sure. No one here, of course.
No one here.
Yeah.
That was just an example.
Just one example.
Just one example
I got you.
of many, yeah.
No, I feel like, so what I was going to say, like, so I love that story, and I feel like it goes back to a lesson that we heard from Anne earlier, which is like, it sounds like you were like, you started to solve the problem, and then you became the person who's helping to solve the problem, and so it was sort of a natural choice. It's like, well, who could help us do this by the time we're thinking of an org change?
Yeah.
Well, you'd already done it. You'd already done it, and so maybe I'm sort of trying to lead you into translating that into a piece of advice for people who aren't in charge of whole orgs.
You just did it.
No, well, help me do it more.
Yeah, no, I think and again, this goes back to sort of what I value in people that I work with is people who see problems and see opportunities and take it like 5 steps further, which is like, okay, and I'm going to, bring these people together to figure out how we can actually solve this problem together. I'm going to recognize why it's not working and go ahead and solve it, right? You don't have to wait for, it's very rare that somebody comes to me having, fleshed out the problem and the solution that I'm upset about.
Here's your project. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I just think that like this, it's rare that that's not going to be a good thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
Like just solve the problem.
Yeah. One of the other things that I admire most about you as a leader, I don't know if you think this about yourself, is that I feel like you're a very steady individual. Like I feel like no matter, like you could have somebody yelling in your face, the world is on fire, like everything is blowing up. And here's Christina just like calmly being like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I don't know, do you feel, is it like screaming inside but outside, like?
So I have gotten that feedback, so thank you for saying that. Yeah. That's very kind. Yes, it's like, what's that, the ducks on the surface look really cool, but they're like, yeah. Yeah, I think that's just sort of my personality. I want to be the person that no matter what the problem is, they feel like they can go to me and have like a steady force. Yeah. I think about that a lot with like my management style, right? Is like I just want to be that steady force for people.
Yeah, but see, I think it's magnetic. It's problem solving, and I feel like one of the lessons of your leadership for me, but also for everybody, is like that kind of like steady problem solving and like calmness, even in the face of a big problem or a disagreement or whatever, is actually it makes you very attractive as a leader and a problem solver. Whether you're just starting out in your career or very senior already, I think just like sure. Paddles under the surface, but like, cool, we got this.
Yeah, and I'm definitely paddling under the surface, right? Like I actually do, that is very important to me though, is, depending on who it is that I'm working with, like if I'm working with a peer, so I don't know where K-Swan went, but there she is. Like she probably heard a lot of my freakouts, right? Yeah. But like with people who reported to me, like I tried to hide some of that.
You have your safe space. Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. What, like being really practical, I'll ask this longer, well, so you drink out of your big cup. Oh, it's very fast. What skills do you think more researchers should be building? Like if they want to be more influential, if they want to have the sort of cross-functional, leadership outside of research, like what skills do you think we should be focusing on developing more?
So we talked about just like being a problem solver, which is so generic, but I do think that that's like, and I was reflecting on like some of what Anne said, like, it's not, you can do the research, but like, what are you going to do with the research, right? Sure. And how are you actually going to use that research to have an impact? And I think there's more that we can do as researchers to actually like take it, more steps to actually make that decision or make that change, right? So I think, problem solving is one of them. I do think that there's something about like, I think sometimes researchers, and I will put myself in this bucket, can be a little bit rigid about like what the definition of research is. And I think there's an opportunity for us to be much more adaptable and flexible. And like research is a really incredible skill that we have, but if you really want to be a leader, you need to like really think outside the box and be comfortable, like not just presenting the report, but also having like a really strong point of view of what should happen next, and then maybe just going to do it, And then I know K-Swan talked about storytelling. Like storytelling is like so important, and any influence that I've had has been because I told a story that somebody cared about, right?
Yeah. Is there an example of that comes to mind? Like when you thought maybe your ability to really own the narrative or tell a good story really helped you as a leader or advance some cause or project?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like, maybe this is sort of like how the research bled into more leadership stuff is like, you mentioned in the introduction that I oversaw something called Workforce Lab, which was born during the pandemic. It was first called Future Forum, and then it was called Workforce Lab. But this was sort of like, I'm not supposed to call it this, but I'm no longer at Slack, so I can still say it. It was like our think tank, right? Like it was like our future of work think tank. Yeah. And there were lots of people involved in that, right? It wasn't just me, but I was responsible. My team was responsible for the actual research, right? And the research was, trying to understand what were the challenges that people were experiencing working remotely, like how is this impacting, so there were so many interesting questions. It was just like a research goldmine. And we could have just, we could have just produced a report, and like that would have been it. But there was this huge opportunity to not just produce the research, but also to influence leaders worldwide, not just internally, but worldwide. Like CEOs and C-suite people who were like really struggling, like, what do I do? Like, how do I lead teams during this crazy time? And there was an opportunity for us to like be that expert, like to really just like show up as like not only do we have the data to back it up, but we're going to put together guidelines, we're going to put together principles for like how you should be leading your team through the pandemic. And I think there was a big opportunity for us to fill that hole, and that's, that was the foundation of it was research, but there was so much more on top of it that
narrative,
the narrative and like even just like putting ourselves out there, like we were also figuring it out, but someone had to sort of stand up and say like, here's what you should do.
Yeah, being willing to just kind of make a statement. And I love that. And I feel like you're pointing out that the sort of overlap between research and producing research and leadership is kind of marketing. In a way, you have to market it. Right? You have to market the insights. You have to turn them into something memorable and powerful and have the confidence to do that.
And that's scary sometimes. Like oh my gosh, the first time I had to like record a video of myself, I think I probably recorded it like 100 times because it was so awkward and so uncomfortable, but it was what needed to happen, and then you get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, over time.
Not really, but
Now you're on camera all the time.
No, I'm not, but I'm at least a little bit better.
So, if you have sort of like the one big takeaway, or like if people remember one thing and they're like, well, Christina thinks that we should do X, like what would be your one big takeaway for everybody in the room as they sort of continue on their leadership journey?
Just one.
You can have as many as you want.
I think one is like, I like to think about, so let's just take sort of what your skill set is off the table. Like if you are like going through a crisis at work, like who is the person that you want to go to and like be that person, right? And so when I think about that, I want to go to somebody who has a positive and optimistic attitude. I want to go to somebody who's going to say like, don't exactly know how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get it done, right? You want those people in your circle, and I've like really tried hard to be that person, right? The person, the steady person, the person who solves problems even if they don't necessarily know how right away. And I think a lot about like who are the people that you want to work with? Who are the people that you want to go to? And I think being that person is sort of like my big takeaway thing.
I mean, it's powerful. Like, how do you be the person that you would want in a crisis? Right? Like that, and I think that's a thing you can do even if you're just starting out in your career, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many people that I've worked with who were 1 year out of school who played that role, and I would go to, like anytime there was like a new project, I would be like, oh, that's the person who. I mean, I can think of people in this room
There's a ton of them in this room
who fit this bill, right? Even though they maybe had 1 year of experience, like I trusted them because I knew that they were going to figure it out and they were going to work hard and make it happen. And I could just like feel that confidence. And that's like a really, really incredible feeling as a leader.
I love it. Very inspiring. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see you. Yeah, take that cup. I'll see you again shortly. Thank you, Christina. All right. Last but definitely not least, our last guest is kind of like a superstar, everybody. Woo! Pratiti Raychoudhury is a leader who worked in research and consumer insights roles at Research International, at PayPal, at Yahoo, before joining Facebook as a research manager in 2010. You would think that was like a whole career, but that was just the beginning. So from joining Facebook in 2010, she ultimately became Vice President and Head of Research at Meta, where she helped lead an organization of over 1,200 researchers around the world, and then moved on to her role as VP Product Group Lead, where her work includes product strategy for some of Meta's core products, as well as leadership on things like easy topics like well-being and social issues. So help me welcome Pratiti. Come on up. Thank you.
So excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. It's a cast of my favorite characters of all time. I told the world's most abbreviated version of your story, but like, what are the parts that you would want to highlight, that you feel like you would want people to know, and considering all the different folks in the room?
Yeah, gosh, where do I start? First of all, this entire time, I'm like, why am I the last speaker? After like 3 incredible speakers, I really need to up my game.
This better be good, Pratiti.
Yeah, right? You know, obviously, since you gave my abbreviated profile, you know, it's been a long journey. Also, actually, one addition, I recently left Meta, and as of today, I've started in a startup called Sundial, which is a data analytics platform started by ex-Meta people. You might know some of them. One was probably your manager.
So what's your role at Sundial?
I am working with the co-founders to build and grow the business. Yes.
A little bit of everything. Okay,
a little
cool.
bit, you know, it's a startup. You do everything. We'll come to that. You know, but I think my journey kind of has been led primarily by 2 things. One is like passion. Do I feel passionate about that space? And the other thing is like being very intentional about it. So I think like joining Facebook is an example. It's, I was at Yahoo. I was already a director there. I ended up taking like several level cuts and pay cuts because this is the product that I really believed in.
Yeah.
And I joined in 2010. It was still relatively early on, not as early as Christina. It could go anywhere. But so it was it was like super, like I was just like really passionate about the product, used it a lot. I completely believed in it. And being intentional is like, I always take the time to reflect, like, what is it that I want to do next? And what is driving me? And this kind of brings to the journey of like product group lead or even joining Sundial. And then the third thing I will say is what are like some non-negotiables, which I will come to. So, and so product group lead, I think, you know, my younger self, I didn't think about it, but as I worked more and more in tech, I think I got really energized being a builder. And I saw myself over time more as a builder than as a researcher. And yes, I used to lead the team and everything, but I saw more of myself as a builder. And I got some experience even leading the research team. I actually had a small product team. Like it was PMs and engineers. We had this product called Fort, it's still there, called Facebook Open Research Transparency. It's actually a data sharing platform to share our data to external academics to do research in a privacy preserved way. And so, you know, and it was actually in some other team, it was not being run as well, and they brought it to me because they needed also that research kind of overview. So that was like my first foray into product building, and that's what, you know, really energized me. And I was like, oh, I can do this, because I think everyone has imposter syndrome. You've done something for a long time, and you're like, I don't know if I can really do it, even if I see myself as a builder. And then I think it was Kristen who mentioned it. We have to be intentional about having these conversations with our managers and manager of my manager's manager, who is now our COO, and he would have regular like skip levels with me, because I think it's particularly important as a leader, because no one really, because you know, you assume like, even it's like I knew my manager for a long time, like, you know, we had a very good relationship. It's not like we were having career conversations.
Right.
So I think, like, you know, especially as leaders, like we have to be very intentional about having those conversations, because I think she mentioned it's like they might not know you want this, or like you're thinking that way.
Yeah.
And so that kind of opened the door. So Javi, who was our COO, so anyway, I did that. Then I led the entire like company strategy for well-being and social impact. That's when I had a lot of experience around like setting company level strategies. So the product group that I was leading up until now is called New Monetization Experiences, and this was 3 years back, they decided to have a new product group to build new revenue streams for the company outside of ads. And as you'll know, Facebook or Meta, our primary business model is ads. So it was to build out subscriptions. And so because it was top of mind for Javi, and so he reached out to me. He was like, hey, would you be interested in doing this role? And spoke about this role and like how Mark was thinking about it. And the last thing I will say, other than being intentional and all the other stuff, like you have to take risks. I think like everyone you heard so far have taken those risks. Like, believe me, none of us knew at the time of taking on a new role what the F are we doing, but we took that risk and you figure it out.
I was hoping you would say the word. I'm not going to say it, but what the F are we doing? Yeah. So in the context of leading a product group, I'm interested in like what you think. So being somebody who had such a long career in research, like, was there something about being a researcher or a research leader which you think you used in the context of being a product group lead? Like, what is it like to be expanding your leadership to include all the functions in a product group?
Actually, interestingly, when I asked for this particular product, I asked Javi, like, why did you think about me? And he said, because it's subscriptions, it's things that we will sell to users, like they will have to buy from us. The MVP, usually we have a very experimentation model. The MVP has to be actually a little more final. Like you can't launch at a particular price point and then experiment your way out. We did run a lot of experiments later, but the MVP has to be a little more little more thought out. The second thing is I also had done, or my background, I had a lot of background in pricing.
I see.
That's when you're charging users, how to think about pricing. So those are things that, my research background really helped. Why would a user buy something from us when we give everything for free? I think that's something just really helped. I think as researchers, Kristen mentioned this, that we are also very thorough. And that actually, I think, is the advantage that we have, and we should use it. We are very thorough, but then I had to figure out how to also move really fast.
Yeah.
With that, that's I think interesting challenge, and startup world is completely different and chaotic, and you have to figure that out. So I do think those are things really research skills that really helped. Yeah.
One of the many reasons I was excited for you to be here is because I think of you, when we worked together at Facebook, as particularly amazing at building trusting relationships with especially with executives. So let's say managing up, if we want to use that term. I feel like you do that as well as anybody I've ever worked with. And so we can't be in the room with you for those conversations. But I'm if you could give everyone the playbook, and if you could do that in 30 seconds or less. No, I'm kidding. But so, and I don't know if you see yourself that way, but knowing I feel like you have clearly got a natural talent at building trust in relationships with cross-functional partners and executives and managing up. So what are one or two things that you think make you successful that you would encourage everybody and invest in building?
I don't see myself that way, but I have gotten that feedback. I think on reflection, I will say one thing is I'm not shy to have hard conversations or ask difficult questions. I think our CMO, some of you who've worked at Facebook, is incredibly tough to work with, but I would always challenge his assumptions. And he actually appreciated me for that. Yeah. He liked the fact that I challenged him, whereas others were scared and didn't do that.
Yeah.
And actually, like, I know it sounds bad, and when you don't do that, they will steamroll you.
Yeah, they'll take the space
They will
you
just
give
like,
them.
yes. So I actually, or similarly, like in my product group role, and I used to have like regular reviews with Mark, and we were going back and forth, like, you know, as product group leads, you set goals, and it was like, we had a goal of like how many subscribers we want, and we had an ARR goal. And we were going back and forth on that. And they're just like two very clear levers for both. If you want an ARR goal, you up the price. If you want a subscriber goal, you lower the price. Right? And so we were just going back and forth, back and forth. And at some point, I just like stopped Mark. I said, what do you want more?
Yeah.
Because they both are at odds with each other. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, I think for some reason, I have not hesitated to like ask hard questions or just be direct, but like, obviously I do it respectfully.
So, okay, say more, yeah. Yeah, so I was just gonna ask you, so, and again, like maybe you've never quite thought of it this way before, but like I've seen you ask those hard questions,
Yes.
It's been a minute, but like to do it in a way which is not threatening, let's say, and actually productive. Like, what's the trick to that? Like, because it is, you talked about risk earlier, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room who are like, wow, that sounds risky as hell. But like, how, like, what would you suggest for people who say, like, ask the hard question, say the hard thing, but do it in a way that sort of de-risks the likelihood of a bad outcome? What did you say?
I think a lot of it, when I think about like my younger self, it was in my mind. Like, oh, if I say this, they will be offended or something. I think the truth is like none of us are offensive. Probably, mostly, mostly.
A couple of
yeah. And I do think like, you know, leaders like being challenged with their assumption. And I think the other thing, actually, I got this feedback from our CMO who used to, you know, head up analytics, and we worked very closely together, is that I'm very dispassionate. I will be very objective about like why I'm saying it, present all the data, and I'll tell them this is why you're wrong. You have not looked at the data this way.
I mean, bold, Pratiti, bold. But I love it, and especially because I feel like a lot of researchers who get very tied to the research and their findings, almost like emotionally invested as a result of such empathy. But maybe you're saying like it might not be the best approach to present it that way.
Yeah, and when I say data, by the way, I just don't mean quant data. Like you don't need to have, like I think a lot of times with qualitative data, we feel unsure that, oh, it's not like large sample or whatever. I still remember we had this product at Facebook called Open Graph, which was like, you know, sharing a lot of like passive actions is the best way to describe it. And I used to do all this research, and people just didn't want to share so much, right? I would go back, and every time I would present that first few times, they're like, yeah, but you spoke to so many users, whatever. Like the third time, I still remember the product group lead who happened to be my manager and was just like wonderful. He was like, I cannot hear another time that people don't want to share. And I looked him in the eye and said, this is all I have. If you don't want to hear, like, too bad.
Can we get away with that?
And it turns out I was right.
Yeah.
This is all I have. You don't have to talk to another user to find that out. I literally said, this is all I have. I cannot tell you something else.
So so I feel like there's a foundation that you have to build to have those honest conversations and to be taken seriously. So like, what's the foundation and how should we build it?
I think so. Actually, this one of my direct reports, gave me that feedback, which I had like never thought about it. And she used to work in a restaurant, like, you know, in the hospitality thing before. And she said, you know, there are two kinds of people in hospitality business. Like there's the maitre d' who's like very well dressed, sits in the, you know, and like will greet you into the door. And then there are these other people, apparently it's called touch table. Like you'll go to every table and say, you know, how are you? Or how's your meal and stuff. And she's like, you're that person.
You're the touch table person?
Touch table person. I would actually like, especially in the office, but even remote, I will just like message them. Like, I would just like, I remember go to, in the morning, because at Facebook we used to sit like close to our product teams, right? Yep. I would just go up to their desk and was like, I saw this, whatever, you should pay attention to this. I would just like walk up to their desk, like, whether they like it or not. I don't know if they like me walking up to their desk, but here I was.
Seemed to work out.
Yeah, it seemed to work out. But I do think like talking, like that touch table just like has worked in my favor.
It's relationship building, right? I feel like what you're saying is like, reach out to people, create consistent touch points, like send them messages, deliver things that are useful, say hello. Yes. Which is harder maybe than it has been in the past since a lot of people are remote, but still.
Well, yeah, so actually interestingly, so in the startup that I'm joining, when you said, what's your role? Because, you just, I'll be working with the co-founders. But one of the co-founders, like, Chandra is like, you will do sales and marketing. Because you will do it better than any of us. And I have never done sales and marketing, to be very clear.
You're gonna.
Yep.
Apparently you have done sales and marketing, just not...
Apparently, just like not formally.
Not formally, yeah, for sure. One thing that occurred to me is that, especially being at Facebook for such a long time, you have seen a lot of ups and downs and evolutions of the field of UX research. And I'm curious, like, your observations on that, where we sit today. In particular, like, is there something you think might be holding us back, or something we could do better, or individually or as a discipline in this particular phase?
I think I'm saying this more, I probably wouldn't have said this if I wasn't a product group lead, but now that I'm as a product group lead and what is important to me, I think the skill that researchers could develop more. The biggest transition I had to make is going from how do you influence decision to making a decision.
Yep.
And that doesn't, I think, as researchers trying to develop that will be super helpful, not necessarily to be a product group lead. Like, you should be what you want to be, but even as a researcher, I think you'll be a better partner. I think immediately, like, the recommendations and the insights you're providing will be very different.
Yeah. So what's one thing that a researcher can do better to sort of improve at moving from influence to decision making?
So, and I did that, as an IC researcher, is actually spending time with your stakeholders in terms of like, what does their day-to-day look like, and why do they need, like, what will they do with that insight? Like engineers, for example, they actually like, and you could even craft your like reports slightly differently, or the touch table when you're like going to an engineer, is they actually just want a breakdown of like, what should they do step 1, step 2, step 3. Yeah. They want something like super, like very clear. Yeah. So I think like being in their mindset a little bit is like really important. Like for data scientists, like one of the things, like actually what the analogy I use is like you have a lot of data, you generate a lot of hypotheses. What's that last mile?
Yep.
Like you need that last mile to close the loop. Like what is that last mile? That's when you need that, Yep. Even people we said who poo-poo on research, like when you say, what's your last mile, they will get it.
Yep, I love it.
And they'll pay attention. It doesn't mean like it will, I think it helps them validate their hypothesis a little bit more. You'll never have perfect answers. You never have perfect answers in this world or in life in general. So, but it just like helps them do their job better.
Yeah. In particular, I'm wondering, because you have been responsible for a very large research org, and I'm curious in like what you see, in particular thinking about earlier career researchers. Like what's your biggest piece of advice for especially earlier career researchers who want to do more in the field, but also might want to just like build those skills of leadership and influence that you've exercised so successfully?
One, I will say, even as earlier researcher, don't be afraid to speak up. I think a lot of times, like, you have it in your, it's happened to me, it's in my head, and someone else said it. I'm like, why? Like, why? And, I had this manager, some of, you'll know him, Mike Vernal, and because he was an engineer and a product group lead, actually he brought out and taught me some of these skills and brought out these things in me. One day he was like, I never hear you speak. And why is that? Because I was like, as a researcher, I have to be almost like 100% sure about what I'm saying. Otherwise, I feel like I'm misleading my stakeholders and stuff. And he was like, so I told him this. He said, it doesn't matter. Because, I always, actually before this, you were saying how come PMs like always have this confidence. Like, he's like, most of them know way less than about a user than you do. Like,
True.
Even if you don't have the perfect research, you still know more than them. But at least I know what they're thinking.
Yes.
And I never know what you're thinking. And that was earlier on in my career. It was really a pivotal shift in my thinking.
I love that. It's such good advice because I feel like many researchers think of themselves primarily as like the vehicle for insights or the vehicle for evidence. And I'm like, but you have a brain. You have insights. You have a point of view, and people want to hear it.
And the point that he made, you still know more about a user than your stakeholder because you have spent way more time with users than anyone else has. And that was I was like, wow.
That's great.
That's how he thinks,
Thanks,
and I
Mike.
had not thought about it.
Props to Vernal for
Right?
that one. Yeah, that's great. So, and maybe that's the thing, but if, just asking you the question I've asked everybody, like if everybody here and on the stream remembers just one thing, one piece of advice from you today, what would you say?
I would say, be very intentional about your career and be very honest with yourself. I think there are two things. One is, no matter, and I've had wonderful managers, no one will look out for you as much as you will.
You are your best advocate.
Yes. And then you have to be very honest with yourself. What is it that you want? What are you good at? What are you not good at? I still spend every Saturday. I'm a very early riser, and people are like, why don't you sleep in on a weekend? I actually leave the house. I go to a coffee shop, I sit and I reflect. I have to, one of my non-negotiables, because a lot of, at this point, one was when I was reflecting, I'd been at Meta for almost 15 years as I thought about, hey, what do I want to do next, next 5 years? And I really wanted to explore something else. Mm-hmm. And I love the company so much, but still, that was the honest answer to myself. The non-negotiable was as I was and sometimes you don't know, so you have to talk to a lot of people. As I was talking to a lot of people, a lot of other companies were reaching out. I was like, I want to work with people who I really trust.
Yes.
And that is what pivoted my decision about joining Sundial. In this stage in my career, I want to work with people I really trust and enjoy. It's still probably a really risky move. You want to take risky moves with people you trust and enjoy.
Yeah. I love that, though. I feel like I often give the same advice. Focus on who you're with, not just what you work on.
Yes.
If you're with great people, good things will happen.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you, Pratiti. Here we are.
Oh.
Okay. Fantastic. We're going to welcome Christina back to the stage, and we have some time for questions, your questions.
Christina and I were planning to twin. We have this thing, we used to often wear the same clothes, and we had a whole twinning series. Then last night I messaged her, and I said, actually, I'm changing my wardrobe because
So her fault, not mine.
I was just mad because
Yes.
I wanted to dress up too, but nobody told me.
We forgot to include you in the chat.
Nobody included me in the chat.
Hi, I wanted to first start off by just saying thank you for these wonderful conversations. I feel like I'm being fed by this discourse today, so thanks to everyone who's contributed. But one of the things that I was really struck by in this last conversation was the willingness to have really challenging and hard conversations with leadership. I've gotten a taste of that so far and found it really rewarding, but I was curious to hear a story, if you have one, about when that went really poorly, how you handled that, and what you did to repair the relationship.
Oh, I will tell you what went. It was like actually one of my first Mark reviews, and actually I'll tell you two stories. One was like, not even like it was my product area, and he kept asking these, and there were a bunch of people, not just me. He kept asking these questions, and we are like, we don't know. Like, I'm like, I don't know, whatever. And Mark, we could see Mark is like pacing around. And after the fifth, I don't know, like we really don't know, he just like walks up to the door and opens the door and says, all of you just leave. When you have your answer, come back. But I have so much respect that he did that. Like, I was like, not just me, all of us were like, okay. And then I did go back 2 days. We did go back 2 days later with all our answer. There was a long document. So yeah, it went very poorly. You can imagine that. The other was actually very interesting. This was like super early on in my career at Meta. I was, we were in this review again with Mark, and my product group lead at that time, I was a researcher, she was leading the review, and there was a question on a slide. It was like this thing, and he said, like, why did the numbers go down here? And she didn't have the answer. I knew the answer, but in my head, I'm like, I'm this junior researcher. How can I speak over the product group lead? So I lean in and I whispered the answer to her. And she gives out the answer, it's done. Everyone leaves the room, and Cheryl was in the presentation. She calls me back, and she said, I saw you do that, and you knew the answer. You should never do that. She said, you gave your power away the moment you did that. That was like, I think those are like experiences you go through that like, you're like, okay, I can be more brave and speak up. But also for her to notice it and then just like call me back and give me that advice, I think. And actually the product group lead, she wrote a book. Her name is Deb Lou, and she has the story in that book. Yeah.
I love that. I was just going to add, I think those are great stories. I think we've probably all been in situations where we're presenting to leadership and we're telling them something that they don't want to hear. And I give you a lot of credit. Like Pratiti is really good at having those hard conversations. They don't always go well, right? They just do not always go well. And I think upon reflection of some of those conversations that didn't go well, I don't think I did a good enough job putting myself in the shoes of the person who had to receive that information, right? They're up against a deadline. Yep. They want to know that like what they're about to launch is going to be great. You're telling them that it's not going to be great, or you're telling them all the problems with what it is that they're going to do. And I think just putting yourself in their shoes and like understanding that you're being very disruptive, right? You're telling the truth, but you're being very disruptive. One of the tricks that I learned is figuring out who, let's say the CEO, who is the CEO's like group of advisors, and preview the information with them first. And so chief of staff is a great one. I used to spend so much time with our CEO's chief of staff, and I would run things by her and say like, okay, how can I share this in a way that's going to be really productive, that's going to like not just tell her that the thing is wrong, but is going to like sort of help the conversation move along. And I think sort of previewing some of that beforehand really helped me figure out how do I actually frame this in a way that's going to be really productive.
That's great advice all around. Great question. Other questions? All the way over here.
Good, they asked Anne and Kristen all the questions. I was hoping that would happen and we wouldn't have to answer
you don't have to
questions.
I'll ask you questions.
Hi, thanks for both your talks. It sounds like it's important to have a proposed solution, and even with your story with Mark, it's like, come back when you have an answer. How do you make the space to come up with the answer if you don't understand the problem space enough? Because it sounds like a lot of places want the solution and to get out of that problem space as quickly and as soon as possible.
I mean, I think if you don't have the solution, I think that's totally fine. I think it's unreasonable to expect you to have a solution to everything, but I think it can be your responsibility to find the right people to help fill in those gaps for you. So if it's, if you're doing research about a specific product area, and you're not quite sure like what that should look like, it's like, who is that product leader that you could then partner with and collaborate with and figure out how do we work through this together so that when we share this, we're not just sharing the challenge or the problem, but we're also coming up with like, this is what we should do about it. So I think some of it is like filling in the gaps with people too, would be my advice.
And also I think as solutions, no one, even as me as a product group lead, is expecting that an answer. Even as a product group lead, like I don't have solutions to a lot of things, but it's really, I think, understanding the trade-offs is more like is what we are looking for versus a solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great advice. I was just going to say, number one, I think most people know more than they think they know. So like to an earlier point, we may not know the whole problem space, but you know enough. And then I think the second part, like to Pratiti's point, is really like how you present a solution is not, hey, here's the answer, I know it 100%, let's go. It's like, here's the thing, this is what we should do, here's why, here are the risks, I might be wrong, here's what we would do, etc. Here's how we're going to find out. That's, I think, all people want to hear,
But also, like, I think K. Swan said this earlier, maybe you don't have like 100% of the solution mapped out, but you have like the next step, right? The next baby step that you can take that is at least in the right direction, that will then buy time to like continue to figure it out, or that will give you more data to figure out was that the right direction and more inspiration for like what you should do next.
Yeah.
And I think that is also feels less risky, right? You don't have to have 100% of the answer, right?
You just got to make progress.
Right.
The next step.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Great question. Other questions?
Okay, this is a question specifically for Christina. Like when you were at Slack, you brought the UXR team and the data science team together. There are several organizations that have tried that model, but usually UXR is embedded in the design team. Like I want to understand from your perspective, like where do you see like a great place for UXRs to be? Maybe it can also be independent.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think that there's like a one size fits all. Like I wouldn't say like every company, they should come together and that's like the obvious solution. So the way that it worked at Slack is I actually had strong feelings or strong opinions that research should not be reporting to design. And honestly, it kind of happened that way because the head of design was on leave when I joined, or he wasn't on leave. He had just started. I think he had started like a week before I started. And they were like, oh, it'll be too much to put you under him. So I ended up reporting to the chief product officer at the time. And I actually really liked that. Like it felt like, we were peers versus reporting to design. I think reporting structures like, anything can work, but I think it's important to sort of, you're not in service of design, right? You're a peer, we're in service of product and marketing and everyone, right? And so I think whatever you can do to sort of establish yourself as an independent leader, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think, I'll just like echo what she said. There is no perfect solution. But it's not just like you felt strongly about design. That's how actually I ended up reporting to Mike Vernal, who was the PG lead. I used to report to, the design lead, and she was like, no, I think you should report directly to the product group lead. She was like, I don't think like I'm adding that much value. And like research should be more broader than just in the service of design. And then Luke Woods, who was our head of design at Meta, used to feel exactly the same way, and he never took on research. So I think for some historic reason, it was set up that way in some companies, and a lot of other companies emulated, but it's not for like any like logical reason. That's my perspective, yeah.
Thank you both. So my name is Graham, and I'm impressed by your stories, and I'm impressed by your leadership of people. And I was wondering if you have any advice for those of us who might be trying to mentor, coach, or develop other researchers. Do you have any tactics or good questions that you like to ask researchers to help them develop in the field?
We both managed each other.
Is that right?
Yes.
You've each managed each other at different points?
We did the flip-flop.
Actually, what I'm going to say is actually very general, and because it applies not just to researchers. Now I've managed not just researchers like PMs, engineers, designers, data scientists, whatever. There are two things. People want to be heard, and they want to be valued. And I think like when we have those conversations, like even every one-on-one, like you have to be present, they have to be heard, they have to be valued. And also like, I remember earlier on, like if you're having a career conversation, make it a career conversation, like very explicitly. I used to have a manager, they were having career conversations, but in their upward feedback, they got some feedback that that manager never had career conversations. And I was like, oh, I thought you had career conversations. And they were also like, yes, I did. It turns out they never called it a career conversation. And so the other person in the receiving side didn't realize those were the career conversations. I was like, no, set up a different time, even a different space. Call the meeting career conversation. It can't be just part of your regular one-on-one, but I think just again being like everyone wants to be valued and be heard.
So the only thing I would add to that is, so be heard was going to be my first thing. Like I think part of the reason that I love being a manager is I like to listen more than I like to talk. And so I really want, to give people the space to share and, help, tell me what's working, what's not working, and so that I can, add value. I think it can feel pretty intimidating at first and feel like you have to have all of the answers, which you absolutely don't. And I think I've made some mistakes early on in my career where I felt like I had to have all the answers.
No, you didn't make any mistakes.
Me?
Yeah.
And I think I learned that, we're all learning, right? And I think part of your role as a manager is to open up the doors to, maybe this person is trying to grow in a way that I'm not necessarily very, well suited to mentor on, but, Sarah is really great at that skill. So I'm going to make that connection and help you sort of, make those connections across the company to provide that sort of support that maybe I'm not personally able to. But I think the more that you can sort of listen to what is it that you want, what is it that you're struggling with, what are your career ambitions? I think you made the point that no one's going to care about your career more than you are, but you can definitely care about, careers as a manager, right? And I think managers could be much better at that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big opportunity.
Why were you looking at me when you said that? No.
What? When I said that you don't care?
They got it, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. This is kind of piggybacking off of that question, but I'm curious, so we've been talking a lot today about how to help people grow in their leadership skills, grow into new roles, experiment, take risks. And I wonder how your thinking or your advice changes for people who are in organizations that are experiencing more of like a stagnation or constriction period versus a growth period, whether for macroeconomic reasons or for other reasons.
Yeah.
I guess I would say my quick answer is that there's even more opportunity in those situations, right? Because if you're at a company that's maybe not hiring as much, or there's like less opportunity to sort of grow in your sort of lane, then maybe there's even more opportunity to look sort of beyond at what are some of the problems that are now holes because that person left the company and they don't get to backfill, right? And I think there's I experienced this especially over the last year where, people leave the company, you don't get to backfill them, that work doesn't just stop, so somebody has to fill in those gaps. And so using that as an opportunity to sort of look sort of more broadly at maybe that thing is actually more important than the thing that I'm working on. Let me talk to my manager about maybe that's where I should be spending my time instead, even though it's not technically in my lane. So I think it actually brings a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I had like the same thought as like, and also like, yes, there's the macro environment, but when you show those take on those opportunities or show that interest, I mean, companies go through ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And when things open up, they're like, okay, this is the person who showed so much initiative, and we'll just go to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When companies are in trouble, they're looking for people who solve problems more than ever, whatever
Problem
the problem
solvers.
is.
Yeah.
Not in trouble necessarily, but you know what I mean. Yeah. When it's not a growth period.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for sharing your experiences with all of us. I guess my question is, I really loved how your talks complemented each other. I think, Christina, you were talking about how you want to be like this opportunistic and optimistic person in the team, and then you also talked about how you want to challenge the team when that's a skill that's needed. And it's really the balance that I'm struggling with of sometimes when you're challenging the team, you can risk becoming the person who's like, oh, like you're the downer, and things like that. And then you also want to be that calming, presence for the team, and you're really appreciating the things that are going well. I guess there is this balance and art of when do you tap into that challenging role? So I'm just really curious about how do you think about those two spaces existing at the same time? When do you decide, okay, this is my time to show the challenging side, and now this is the time to be the positive side, I guess?
This is like my daily struggle. Yeah. So I'm reflecting on a conversation that I had with a former manager, and she was giving me this feedback that she's like, you're so positive, you're so optimistic. That's why I love working with you. I always know that you're going to, make it work. She's like, but sometimes she's like, don't forget, it's okay to raise your hand and say this is not working anymore. And she gave this example where, we were going through phases where we kept getting our head count cut. And everyone would be really up in arms about I can't believe my head count's getting cut. And what did I do? I'd be like, oh, no worries. I can make it work. It's all fine. And she gave me this feedback. She's like, I love that about you, but also stop doing that. Yeah. And I think that's something that I really struggle with. But I think the fact that you're asking that question is evidence that you have already established yourself as the person who is optimistic and who does make it work. And so I think you probably have more of an opportunity to just you have that trust already. You already have that trust in your piggy bank, right? And so when you raise your hand and say, hey, this isn't working, people are going to pay attention to that even more, right? But I think if you frame it in a way that you present the evidence, you help them understand why this is not working or whatever it is, it'll probably go better than you think.
Yeah. I think they don't have to be at odds with each other. I think how you challenge is really important. I think in general, I bring in humor, keep the environment positive even when you're pushing people. And also I still remember we were my first product was supposed to launch in May, and Mark was like, can you go in Feb because something else was changing? I was like, all right, great, what do we do? We had to go into this intense period. But even me, my eng leader, we all rolled up our sleeves. My eng leader was coding every day. So it's just I think how you do it is really important, and I don't think we have to think they are at odds with each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the how you do it, I think, sorry, just to add one more thing. There was sort of a shift that I made a few years ago where I stopped thinking of myself as a researcher and started thinking of myself as just somebody who's making the company successful. And I think, when you think of yourself as a researcher, it feels very limiting sometimes. And if you can like help make sure that all of your stakeholders and all of your trusted partners know that like, no, you're here to make the company successful. Like that is what you care most about, right? So when you give that research feedback, or when you push back or you say they're doing the wrong thing, you're not doing that because that's what the research says. You're doing that because like you're really trying to make the team like you want everyone to succeed. Like I want you to succeed. And that's why I'm giving you this hard feedback. So it's coming from a place of love or whatever, however you want to say it. And so I think just making sure that that's sort of how you show up, I think really helps.
There you go. All right, we have another question over here. Maybe one or two after this, and we're almost out.
Hi, thank you all so much for sharing. Question for you, because going off of what you just said, you talked about how we can't define ourselves as researchers because it's limiting. So what would be your advice as having held different roles, product developer, analyst, that you would give us to think about how we can embody that stakeholder's persona or mindset, as you said, Pratiti, in order to better define ourselves as research and be more adaptable and flexible in that definition?
I mean, I think a lot of it starts by just like really having deep empathy for the people that you're working with and understanding like where they're coming from and where they're struggling with, so that when you are, either doing research or presenting a report or a point of view or whatever, you're doing it in a way that's going to be like the most helpful to like move to the next, to success, right? And I think you have to like really take the time to get into the shoes of like your stakeholder. So I'll give you an example or a quick story. I remember this time where my boss at the time, this is sort of deep in like, future of work type research. And, there's like endless questions and endless research that we were doing. And she came to me and she said, hey, can you write like a one-pager on like what the future of work is going to look like in 5 years? And I was like, well, that's like a pretty big question. Sure. And she's like, I need this tomorrow. And I was like, well, that's, in my head, I didn't say this out loud, like the duck paddling underneath the surface.
See,
like,
it was fine. In your head, I literally would have said that is interesting.
Yeah, that's a big ask. Like there's so much research that we would need to do that, or that we've already done that we would need to like, summarize. And then I decided to ask a few more questions, and I asked, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about like why you need this or what this is for? And she's like, well, tomorrow I'm going to be sitting on stage at a conference, and that's the question that I'm going to be asked. And I was like, okay, well, you're in a tough situation. You have this big ask for tomorrow. You're going to be asked by a bunch of, I don't remember what the conference was. Okay, I have a lot of empathy for you. I might not be able to do all of the research that I would like to be able to do, but I know a lot because I've been doing a lot of research, and I can absolutely help you out here. It's not going to be perfect, but I have so much that I can say that will help you in the situation that you're in, right? And so I think having that like empathy for what they're going through, because they're probably not asking for something ridiculous just to be ridiculous, right? Yeah. And so I think that was helpful for me.
Actually, another thing Mike Vernal had said, he's given me lots of good advice, but one of the things he had said was, as you grow as a leader, it's less about your function. Your influence is less through your function, but what Christina alluded to is like you're a leader in this company, and how do you move the product or the decision forward? Obviously, it takes time to develop, and that's why he gave that advice, is as you grow more and more senior, and even like the best leaders that I see in the company, like, Luke Woods, whom I mentioned, he still leads design, but he is an influencer, not just through the craft of design, but just like how we should be thinking about the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Please help me thank Christina and Pratiti. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, just to wrap up for a quick second, this sort of mini conference was born from a conversation I had with Alec over a year ago. And it was basically like this. We looked around and we said, my goodness, like if you look around at the research community, it is full of such amazing leaders. And those people are leading in research, but there's so much opportunity. Wouldn't everything be better in all of our companies if more researchers were leading cross-functionally? That was kind of the idea. And so we thought, let's bring together some amazing people who are doing that already and see what we can learn, to become inspired, to get tidbits, right? Just because of the belief that I think companies, users, our colleagues, products would be better off if there were more researchers in more cross-functional leadership roles, and that we all have the tools to get there already. So I hope today, I hope you have become inspired by these stories. I hope you've learned some practical lessons that you can apply, whatever your current situation is. And I hope you get out there and figure out a way to continue leading, because I think we're all going to be better off if all of us do that together. So thanks for coming today. Really appreciate you. Please give a round of applause for all of our amazing speakers today, too.
Join a global industry of researchers, designers, and product managers who use Maze to get insights at the speed of product development.
you.